Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kaylee Sawyer. Kaylee Sawyer was born on March 2, 1993, in Bend, Oregon. At 23, she is a smart, cheerful, and optimistic young woman. She knows how to cherish every moment in life. She lives with her boyfriend, Cameron Reimhofer, in an apartment near their college. They appeared to be the perfect couple, and Cameron really likes Kaylee's parents. Initially, Kaylee aspired to be a photographer and found some success in that area. However, she later took a job as an administrator at a dental clinic, where she showed her best abilities, as she knows how to approach each patient and make them feel comfortable, even if they are nervous about going to the dentist. While working at the clinic and observing the dentists, she realized that she wanted to become a dentist herself. She felt this was her big opportunity, as people trusted her and felt comfortable seeking dental treatment from her. On Saturday evening, July 23, 2016, Kaylee attended a bachelorette party in the city center with a friend and a few co-workers. They had fun dancing, congratulating a colleague, and drinking. Since most attendees were middle-aged, the party ended early, around 10:30 p.m. However, Kaylee and a few other young women decided to go to another bar, where they kept drinking, dancing, and having a great time. At the bar, a man began flirting with Kaylee, and Cameron's friend noticed. Friend sent a message to Cameron, letting him know that Kaylee was there with another guy, which made he angry. After midnight, Kaylee, feeling tired and quite drunk, called Cameron to pick her up. Although he was upset with her, but he went to get her right away. Kaylee was at a restaurant with some friends when he arrived. On the way home, they argued because Kaylee had been drinking heavily and talking to another man. When they reached home, a frustrated Cameron got out of the car and went straight to the apartment. Upset from their argument, she stayed in the car to collect her thoughts. After 10 minutes, when she didn't come inside, Cameron received a text from her. She apologized for her behavior and said goodbye, leaving he confused. He quickly ran to the car, but when he got there, the front passenger door was wide open, and she was gone. He called her, and she told him she was out for a walk. She also mentioned that her phone was low on battery, and then the call disconnected. Cameron believed that Kaylee had gone to her friend's house, which was 6 kilometers from campus. He got in his car and drove to her friend's location. Despite he drove slowly and looked around to find her, but he did not see her anywhere. That night, he could not locate her, and her phone went unanswered. He thought she might be out with friends and expected her to return home the next morning. He returned to their apartment and went to bed. However, when he woke up the next morning, there were still no calls from her. And her phone went directly to voicemail. He grew concerned, as this behavior was unusual for Kaylee. Cameron reached out to Kaylee's family to see if they had any information. Her parents told him that she hadn't called them either, but they also believed she could have stayed overnight with friends and would return soon. Cameron then contacted all her friends and co-workers, but no one knew her whereabouts. Growing increasingly worried, he decided to report her missing to the police. When the police arrived, they listened to Cameron's account, but they suggested she would likely return shortly. As a result, the police were in no hurry to search for her. Kaylee did not return home the next day and she missed work. She was a responsible employee who never skipped a day, so it became apparent that something was wrong. The police launched a search for her. Cameron's behavior was odd and caused suspicion. He had shown jealousy towards another man and left in his car to look for her. Her phone suddenly ran out of battery, and Cameron was the last person to have seen her, so he became the primary suspect. Then, he was called in for questioning. During the interrogation, he stuck to his story and cooperated with the investigation by allowing a search of his apartment and car without a warrant. He also took part in the search for Kaylee. Cameron passed a lie detector test, so all charges against him were dropped. The police suspected a man who had flirted with Kaylee might be connected to her disappearance. They began investigating to identify him, seeking witnesses who have seen their interaction or had contact information for him. They eventually located the man, but he was intoxicated that night and couldn't recall many details. He didn't remember Kaylee's name or her phone number and claimed he had not seen her again. The police visited the homes of Kaylee's friends and relatives to check if she had been with them. They only found her car, which she had left at a friend's bachelorette party. This suggested that she had not returned for her car, making it unlikely she had gone elsewhere. Unable to trace her phone, police checked the route she may have taken that night for clues. They looked for signs of a struggle, blood, or surveillance camera footage, but found nothing. Meanwhile, Cameron, along with Kaylee's parents and friends, distributed flyers with her photo throughout the city and shared information about her disappearance on social media. A clue has emerged in the Kaylee case. A rookie police officer named Isabel came to the station with an important story. Her husband, Edwin Lara, who works as a college security guard, had been acting unusually since Sunday. After returning home late from his night shift, he seemed troubled. Eventually, he confessed to she that on the night of Sunday, July 24th, he accidentally struck a young girl with his work vehicle. He claimed the girl was drunk and fell under the wheels, but him unable to stop in time. He also revealed that he hit her body and that her belongings were in their barn. Police quickly arrived at Edwin's home, but he had already escaped. Upon searching the property, they discovered several items: a woman's handbag filled with various personal items and cosmetics, a pair of shoes, strands of light hair, and a large bloody stone. To their shock, these items were also stained with blood. Later, it was confirmed that the hair and belongings belonged to Kaylee, the missing girl. This evidence suggested that Edwin's account of an accident was false. It appeared he had used the stone to harm Kaylee, likely resulting in her death. Despite their thorough search of the house and surrounding area, her body was nowhere to be found. It seemed clear that Edwin had not just vanished, he likely transported the body away in his vehicle. Isabel did not report her husband to the police right away because she feared for her safety. Instead, she pretended to support him and waited some time before going to the police. By then, he had managed to leave the city, making it harder for the authorities to locate him. When the police asked Isabel where he might have gone, she mentioned that his parents lived in Los Angeles, suggesting he could be hiding there. A police officer traveled to Los Angeles, and on the way, they found his car abandoned. They discovered strange notes inside the vehicle, containing numbers and apologies for his actions. The police examined the notes, but they did not lead to any significant clues, and there were no signs of an accident involving the car. They concluded that Edwin was likely heading to his parents' home. Meanwhile, Edwin's phone was not being tracked, and he continued to commit crimes after his escape. He kidnapped a 19-year-old girl named Andrea. He saw her getting into her car after finishing her shift at the store and noticed her using her phone. Quietly, he approached her, opened the passenger door, and got inside her car. Armed with a gun, he threatened her and demanded that she drive him to California. Terrified, she agreed to drive him to California. During the journey, he told her about what he had done to a girl named Kaylee and even showed her a photo of Kaylee along with news articles about his being wanted. He claimed that his car had broken down while he was trying to leave the city and that he was searching for someone to take him to Los Angeles. Edwin initially considered kidnapping a pregnant woman, but he couldn't find one. Instead, he spotted Andrea alone in a parking lot and decided she would be his target. This was terrifying for Andrea, but she tried to remain calm to survive. A few hours later, Edwin thought she was driving too fast and might attract police attention. He ordered her to stop and switch to the passenger seat, then handcuffed her to the car while he took the driver's seat. Andrea realized her only chance of escape was to gain his trust. Andrea said to Edwin that she understood his situation, mentioned that her car was leaking oil, which was true. She suggested they get another car, hoping he might release her. But it didn't work. They stopped at a gas station and a diner, but Edwin instructed her to remain silent and not speak to anyone, otherwise, he will kill her and everyone she talks to. Andrea obeyed and did not talk to anyone, she just trying to signal through her demeanor that something was wrong, but no one noticed. They eventually stopped to spend the night at a motel. Edwin planned to rape her there, and the girl knew this well. Andrea devised a plan to escape. After entering the room, she quietly turned on the alarm on her phone. As Edwin started to bother her, the alarm rang. He became paranoid, thinking it was a police signal and feared he was being followed. However, Andrea said it was a notification so she wouldn't forget to take her medicine. When he asked about her illness, she said she had a venereal disease, causing Edwin to stop bothering her immediately. They lay on opposite sides of the bed, and she was restrained with chains and handcuffs. He tried to sleep but was overwhelmed with panic. Convinced the police were coming for him. Meanwhile, Andrea hoped he would fall asleep quickly so she could make her escape. Eventually, Edwin jumped out of bed and used a disposable phone to call someone, and he speaking in Spanish. Although Andrea couldn't understand him, but he told her they needed to leave urgently. They drove away, but soon the car's oil began to boil. Edwin grew angry and told Andrea they needed to find another car. At that moment, Andrea's hopes for escape vanished. She had anticipated he might leave her with the car and he go on his way, but he had other plans. On their way, they noticed a model car surrounded by several other cars and decided to approach it. An elderly man is loading things into his car. Edwin believed this was the car he was looking for. He took Andrea with him, went to the car, and threatened the elderly man with a gun, demanding the car keys. The man began to call for help, prompting Edwin to shoot at him. Afterward, Edwin grabbed Andrea and ran toward the gas station. By the time the police arrived, the elderly man had survived. At the gas station, Edwin found a car with its doors open. They got inside and drove off, but 3 children were already in the car. A 17-year-old, who had just received his driver's license, was behind the wheel. Edwin threatened little boy with a gun and forced him to drive away from the gas station. The car belonged to a family from Canada who was visiting the US. When the parents returned from shopping at the gas station, they found their car and children gone. They were very frightened and immediately called the police. Edwin ordered the children to throw their phones out the window to avoid being tracked. He claimed to be a dangerous criminal and could kill them all. The children were terrified. However, the teenager convinced Edwin that if he let them go, he would be safer. This was because they would make it more difficult for Edwin to escape, and it would be easier for the police to detect him. He agreed to this. So he dropped the children off at the side of the road and continued driving with Andrea. In a panic, Child realized he still had his phone and called his parents. They, along with the police, quickly located the children. The kids were frightened and reported that they had been kidnapped by a dangerous criminal. They mentioned that Edwin, the kidnapper, had confessed to committing murders. Immediately after that, the police chased after Edwin's car. Edwin regretted his decision to steal the car with the children inside. Aware that the police were after them, he chose to record a video on their journey to California. In the video, he apologized for his crimes and made Andrea post it on her Facebook with a caption that the killers are free. As he grew more paranoid, he told she that he heard helicopters, though she saw and heard nothing. A patrol car began chasing Edwin, and eventually, he was arrested. Andrea couldn't believe she was free, but her nightmare was far from over. After getting out of the car, She was also arrested. Initially, the police suspected she was his accomplice and searched her. They interrogated her, forcing her to prove her innocence. After 18 hours, she was finally released. Police in Bend, Oregon are investigating Kaylee's disappearance and are looking for Edwin because he is the prime suspect. They learned of his arrest and went to the California police station to question him. During the interrogation, Edwin claimed that Kaylee had either been accidentally struck by a car. When police asked for more information, he admitted that he had used a rock to hit her on the head, with the intention of stopping her from screaming, as he believed she was still alive at the time. However, the police informed him that when they checked his car, they found no signs of an accident. Suddenly, Edwin changed his testimony, saying he had intended to pick Kaylee up because he thought she was a prostitute. This seems suspicious because in that area, there are no prostitutes. It is common for students to return home drunk from parties. But usually campus police take these students home. Edwin then gave a seemingly truthful statement. He said that on the night Kaylee disappeared, he was driving his company car around the university area and saw a young, drunk woman walking. Edwin stopped and offered to give Kaylee her ride. Seeing that he was a security guard, she accepted, thinking she would be safe. Unfortunately, he raped her, strangled her, and then killed her by repeatedly hitting her in the head with a rock. He later admitted that he had wanted to kill for a long time and was inspired by serial killers. That night, when he saw Kaylee on the road, he decided she would be his first victim. He had planned other murders for some time. Initially, he was reluctant to reveal where he had disposed of her body, but eventually, he pointed it out to the police on a map. When the police searched the area Edwin indicated, they found a mutilated body that was unrecognizable. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury from a blunt object. As a result, Edwin Lara was charged with Kaylee's murder, rape, along with other crimes including Andrea's kidnapping and carjacking. He was taken to Oregon, where he faced the death penalty. During the trial, he asked to call his lawyer, but that request was denied. During the interrogation, Edwin confessed to the murder, but his testimony was excluded and was not considered at trial. The prosecution needed to prove that Edwin was the one who killed Kaylee and committed other crimes. However, they have a lot of evidence, including items found in his shed. His DNA was on Kaylee, testimony from his wife, and Andrea's testimony where he described Kaylee's murder. The prosecution wanted to ensure that Edwin would be sentenced to life without parole. Edwin reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting to attempted murder and kidnapping, but he would not admit to rape in return for a life sentence. In the end, Edwin Lara was found guilty and received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Subsequently, Kaylee's family sued the university, claiming it failed to properly conduct a psychological evaluation or gather vital information when hiring Edwin as a security guard. They emphasized that the college had provided him with a weapon, handcuffs, and a bulletproof vest, which were used during his crimes. This lawsuit was settled for $2 million. After the incident, the college began conducting background checks on all security guards, implemented psychological testing, and strengthened their security policies. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Isabella Rodriguez. Isabella Rodriguez was born in Colombia in 1975 and moved to Florida with her family in the 1990s. They obtained U.S. residency and eventually citizenship in 2002, when Isabella was 27. She married William Hellman, but they divorced in 2015 after a decade together. Isabella then met Louis Bennett online, and they began a romantic relationship. In 2016, Isabella and Louis had a daughter named Amelia. 6 months later, they purchased an apartment in Delray Beach, a city on Florida's Atlantic coast. They married the following month, in February 2017. At the time, Isabella worked as a real estate agent, and Louis owned a small solar panel company. On April 30, 2017, Isabella flew to the Caribbean island of St. Martin to meet Louis, leaving their 9-month-old daughter with relatives. They planned to spend a week on the water, returning home to Florida on Louis's sailing catamaran. After stopping in the British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, they arrived in Cuba, where they stayed for a few days. On May 14, the catamaran set sail from Varadero, Cuba, bound for Florida. Isabella called her sister 3 hours later to say she would be home the next day. At around 1 a.m., Louis sent out a distress signal to the U.S. Coast Guard, reporting that his ship had collided with an unknown object and was sinking. He also reported that his wife, Isabella, was missing. A Coast Guard helicopter crew located Louis in a life raft around 4 a.m. and took him to Key West Island, the southernmost part of Florida. The catamaran was found floating upside down at dawn, but had not yet sunk. During an interview with investigators, Louis explained that he and Isabella took turns keeping watch. At the time of the accident, it was Isabella's turn, and Louis was asleep in his stateroom. He woke up to the sound of the collision and rushed on deck, but couldn't find Isabella. He called out her name, but she didn't respond. Louis suspected that the loose mast might have knocked her overboard. Louis also stated that the last time he saw Isabella, she was wearing a life jacket. When he was rescued, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer noticed that Louis's backpack was unusually heavy. Upon inspection, officers found 225 collectible coins in the backpack, but their origin was unclear. Isabella Hellman went missing on May 15, prompting a 4-day search and rescue operation by the Coast Guard. As no signs of her were found, the operation was officially ended on May 18th. The authorities were suspicious when Louis Bennett, Isabella's husband, requested a letter from the Coast Guard stating that his wife was presumed dead just 24 hours after the search had ended. The Coast Guard denied the request, as it was outside their jurisdiction to issue such a certificate. 6 days later, Louis announced on TV that he was traveling to Cuba to rent a boat and continue the search for his wife on his own. However, just 3 days after making this statement, Louis claimed to have already returned from Cuba and met with Isabella's sister, saying he had checked hospitals but found no signs of her. Louis expressed his despair and resignation to the situation, stating he was struggling to accept that his wife might be gone. He described Isabella as his soul mate and someone he thought he would be with forever. The next day, Louis and the police attempted to retrieve his daughter from his wife's family, but they refused to relinquish her. Louis ultimately took custody of his daughter with the help of the police, despite the scandal surrounding him. During the dispute, Isabella's sister repeatedly accused Louis of being responsible for Isabella's death. Louis's calm behavior and actions after his wife's disappearance raised suspicions among both Isabella's family and the police. Investigations revealed that Isabella and Louis had frequent arguments after the birth of their child. Family, friends, and neighbors all confirmed this. Isabella had confided in loved ones that Louis wanted to move to Australia, but she was opposed to leaving the United States. On May 30th, Louis gave an interview in which he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance. He claimed they had plans for a happy life together, but now he was alone and their daughter would grow up without a mother. While investigating Isabella's disappearance, the police also looked into the origin of valuable coins found among Louis's belongings. It was discovered that Louis had previously worked as a first mate on a yacht. The captain of that yacht had a collection of 617 rare coins worth around $100,000, which was discovered a year earlier. While the yacht was unoccupied and docked in the Caribbean, thieves broke in and stole the coins on board. Although the perpetrator was not caught at the time, The yacht's captain later identified the coins found on Louis Bennett as part of the stolen loot, now that the FBI was investigating their origin. This new information led the FBI to obtain a search warrant for Louis's apartment. Previously, 225 coins had been found among his belongings when he was rescued. On June 16, 2017, the search of his apartment uncovered an additional 162 gold coins hidden in a closet. Meanwhile, Louis had relocated to England, where his parents lived, and had taken his daughter with him. However, due to financial difficulties, he returned to the United States and settled into an apartment valued at $125,000, while also receiving insurance payments for a lost catamaran. On August 28, 2017, Louis Bennett was arrested in Florida and charged with stealing coins. He pleaded not guilty. A few days later, a federal judge set his bail at $250,000, which Louis was unable to pay. As a result, he remained in custody while awaiting trial. Additionally, Louis attempted to have his wife declared dead. Louis benefited from his wife Isabella's disappearance by gaining control of their shared property and bank accounts. However, the judge refused to declare Isabella dead twice, as the investigation into her disappearance was ongoing. In a separate case, Louis pleaded guilty to stealing coins and transporting them to the United States in November 2017. Louis's parents asked the judge to be lenient when sentencing him, citing the fact that his daughter had already lost her mother. In February 2018, Louis received a sentence of 7 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation. On the same day, Louis was charged with second-degree murder in Isabella's death. Authorities believed he intentionally caused the catamaran they were on to crash, which was allegedly a staged event to cover up the crime. The prosecutor's case was based on a claim that Louis wanted to inherit Isabella's wealth to pay off his debts and take their young daughter to live in Australia. Isabella had expressed fear of her husband in text messages a few months before her death, stating that she felt he no longer respected her. She expressed fear about returning home. In a message sent months before her disappearance, Isabella wrote, "If you no longer like or love me, let's resolve this immediately. It's sad how you treated me the entire time." An inspection of the catamaran before it sank revealed that the portholes below the water line were left open. The damage to the dual hulls seemed to originate from within the vessel, near the water line. The water line is the point where the surface of the water meets the hull of a floating vessel. An expert hired by the FBI analyzed photos and videos taken by the U.S. Coast Guard of the catamaran before it sank. The expert concluded that Louis's account of the events was not credible. The analysis suggested that the vessel did not sink due to accidental damage, but rather appeared to have been intentionally scuttled. A professor of nautical architecture and ocean engineering at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy testified in court that the Coast Guard found no evidence of a collision that could have caused the catamaran to sink. Divers inspecting the vessel were cautious due to the risk of collapse, and eventually, the catamaran sank to a depth of over 4,000 feet, preventing a detailed inspection. 2 years after Isabella Hellman's disappearance, a judge officially declared her dead. Palm Beach County Circuit Judge Scott Suskauer issued a series of orders stating that Isabella was presumed to have died on May 14, 2017. Despite the passage of time, Isabella's body has not been found, and she has not contacted her family. Based on the available evidence, it is presumed that Isabella is deceased. The statement said, in January 2019, U.S. District Judge Federico Moreno suspended Louis's February sentencing hearing in Miami and rescheduled it for May 28, saying he would not act until Isabella's family could personally visit her daughter Amelia, who turned 3 in July. In November 2019, Louis pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and the second-degree murder charge against him was dropped. Before the plea deal, he faced a possible life sentence for second-degree murder, but the new charges limited his maximum sentence to 8 years in prison. According to a document filed with the court, Lewis claimed he didn't remember what he was doing when he discovered his wife was missing. He didn't search for her on the catamaran or in the water, nor did he use flares to signal for help. Instead, Lewis packed his belongings onto a life raft and then intentionally damaged the catamaran to make it flood, allowing him to escape on the raft. Prosecutors stated that Lewis waited 45 minutes after realizing his wife was missing to call for help. Notably, the U.S. Attorney's Office pointed out that Lewis was an experienced sailor with training in emergency procedures, having previously sailed from St. Martin to Australia. Don't understand why he failed to use his knowledge to respond to the emergency situation. Prosecutor states that Lewis admitted to being negligent in handing over control of the catamaran to his inexperienced wife, Isabella, resulting in her falling overboard and drowning. Despite being an experienced sailor with a Royal Yachting Association certification, Lewis failed to ensure Isabella wore proper safety gear. In contrast, Isabella had no formal sailing training or experience, and Lewis knew it. Lewis received training in emergency procedures, including man-overboard protocols and night sailing safety, but Isabella did not. The prosecutor notes that only Lewis knows the full story of what happened on the catamaran that night. Following Lewis' guilty plea, Isabella's family, through their lawyer, expressed their immense pain and asked Lewis to show remorse. They stated that while Lewis can never undo the harm caused by taking Isabella away, he continues to cause additional pain by depriving them of contact with his and Isabella's daughter, Amelia. Isabella Hellman's family is grieving and missing her dearly. Although they have had limited contact with her daughter Amelia through 3 FaceTime calls, they have not been able to see or hug her in a long time. They long to be reunited with Amelia and provide her with love and care. As a part of their family, they want to be with her. They urged Lewis Bennett to do the right thing. Lewis Bennett, Isabella's husband, was sentenced to 8 years in prison on May 28, 2019, after pleading guilty to manslaughter in connection with her death. During his sentencing hearing, Bennett apologized sincerely to Isabella's family for putting them through immense pain. He acknowledged that his actions led to a devastating tragedy, for which he is truly remorseful. Lewis admitted to making poor decisions that worsened the situation. He expressed regret in federal court in Miami, where he waived his right to appeal as part of his plea bargain. Before the judge delivered the sentence, Lewis requested the opportunity to be released from prison early so that he could continue to care for their daughter, Amelia. Lewis expressed a desire to care for his daughter, saying, "I want to raise her in a way that honors my late wife's wishes." However, the judge ruled against him, sentencing him to 8 years in prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. As a result, Amelia will remain with her paternal grandparents in England for the time being. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Luke Jobson. Luke Jobson, a 22-year-old who was on the verge of qualifying as an electrical and mechanical engineer after completing 4 years of study and an apprenticeship. He was a well-liked and talented individual who was known for his athletic abilities, particularly in football. Growing up, Luke attended St. Patrick's Comprehensive and Hawood Primary Schools in Thornaby. He was a talented sportsman, playing football as a center forward for Thornaby Central in his youth. His love of clothes and fashion was evident, and he took great pride in his appearance. According to his dad, Stuart, Luke was a perfectionist who would often check his family members' clothes to ensure they looked their best. Stuart described Luke as a genuine and beautiful person, both inside and out. Luke, a young man from Yarm, attended a nightclub called The Keys on Saturday, January 26, 2019, along with his friends. Yarm is a small town, and The Keys is a popular spot on the high street, where the town's nightlife is concentrated. Luke failed to return home after his night out at the Keys, and his parents tried to contact him on Sunday morning, but he didn't respond. His friends were also unaware of his whereabouts. Luke's family quickly took to Facebook to appeal for help, and many people joined the search for him. The police investigation began on Sunday, and Cleveland police released a statement expressing concern for Luke's disappearance, as it was out of character for him. They asked the public to share any private CCTV or dashcam footage that might be relevant to the case. Police had learned about a possible altercation involving Luke shortly before his disappearance. According to reports on social media, Luke got into a fight with several people outside the Keys around 2 a.m. The last reported sighting of Luke was near Yarm School at around 2:15 a.m. The police were investigating this information, but their top priority was finding the missing young man. Luke's girlfriend, Danny, made a heartfelt plea on social media, describing her experience as a living nightmare and urging anyone with information to come forward. Luke's cousin, Jake, also reached out on Facebook, asking for help in locating Luke. He was last seen fleeing from a group of young men on Yarm High Street. Friends and family initiated a search for Luke near the River Tees in Yarm on Sunday, which eventually grew into a large-scale operation. By Monday morning, hundreds of concerned individuals gathered at Yarm School's car park, eager to contribute to the search. Despite many not knowing Luke personally, the overwhelming response to the Facebook appeal showcased the community's spirit. Cars arrived at the car park, carrying people who were ready to aid in the search. Many others arrived on foot, dressed in warm clothing, prepared to brave the cold weather. Over 300 people participated in the search, which was divided into 18 groups that scoured various areas, including Preston Park, Stokesley, Cottonwood, Early Nook, and Hilton. Specialist police search teams also combed the River Tees banks near Yarm School. A body found in a River Tees has been identified as 22-year-old Luke Jobson, who had been missing. Cleveland police confirmed the news and expressed their condolences to Luke's family and friends. Family members are being supported by specially trained officers during this difficult time. In a tribute, Luke's parents, Lisa Jobson and Stuart Banks, described their son as a popular and ambitious young man who loved working out at the gym. Luke's mother, Lisa, said they are proud of everything he achieved and want to celebrate his life. She added that they want everyone to remember him for the good things he did. The news of Luke's death sparked an outpouring of emotion in the Teesside community. Friends and family members flooded social media with tributes, and a huge crowd gathered in Yarm for a vigil in his memory. Almost 1,000 people attended the event, which included a firework display and a rendition of Angels by Robbie Williams. The community showed their support for Luke's family by leaving ribbons, balloons, and flowers near the scene of his death. As the police investigated Luke's death, they spoke to numerous individuals, including those who were at the nightclub on the night of the incident. They also obtained CCTV footage, which corroborated earlier reports of a confrontation between Luke and several others. The footage shows Luke wearing a gray t-shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. It appears that Luke made a comment to someone, which caused several aggressive-looking individuals to approach him. The situation quickly escalated, and Luke can be seen running away from the group as they chase after him. News of a confrontation being linked to Luke's death emerged soon after he disappeared, as speculation about what had happened spread on social media. Initially, the police only confirmed reports of an altercation prior to his disappearance. They arrested 6 teenagers, aged from 16 to 18, on suspicion of involvement in Luke's death, but later released all of them. The investigation continued, and a new development in the case occurred the following January. Cleveland police announced that 5 people, aged 17 to 20, had been charged with a fray, which involves using or threatening unlawful violence, but not with Luke's death. They were set to appear in court. The 5 individuals charged include a 17-year-old, now 18, who cannot be named due to age restrictions, Edwin Taha, 20, Ryan Alp, 19, Ali Abdul Majid, 19, and Hamad Asif, 18. According to reports, Edwin Taha was the alleged leader of the group. In England and Wales, a person can be charged with affray if they use or threaten violence towards another person in a way that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety. To understand the events leading up to Luke Jobson's death, we need to consider the following points. Firstly, when 2 or more people use or threaten violence, their actions are considered collectively. Secondly, for a threat to be valid in this context, it cannot be purely verbal. Looking at the recording, it's clear that Luke was concerned for his safety as he was seen running away. The threats against him were not just verbal. Unfortunately, the exact cause of the conflict remains unclear, as none of the suspects provided a clear answer. Additionally, the whereabouts of Luke's friends, who were with him at the nightclub, are unknown at the time of the quarrel. The police recording does not provide this information. From the footage, it appears that Luke was not planning to leave the club, as he was standing outside in just a t-shirt, with his jacket still inside. The footage shows Luke confronting a group before being forced to run for his safety. Initially, his athletic ability allowed him to overcome his suitors. However, the group, including Taha and other future defendants, returned to the nightclub, got into a car, and caught up with Luke near a school. They sprayed Luke's face with an unknown substance, suspected to be pepper spray, causing him to lose his sight. In an attempt to escape, Luke climbed over a wall into the school grounds, where CCTV cameras captured his entry into a boathouse. Sadly, this was the last time Luke was seen alive. After Taha pepper sprayed Luke's face, the group got back into their car and drove away. It's unclear whether Luke knew where he was going, but given that he didn't attend school there and was disoriented from the tear gas, it's unlikely he understood his surroundings. If this was the case, it's possible he accidentally fell into the water once he entered the boathouse. It's worth noting that these events took place in January, when the water in the river was extremely cold. According to the police, no one else entered the boathouse that night, and Luke never came out. 2 days later, the police found his body in the water near the school, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The suspects initially refused to admit guilt, but during the first court hearing on September 28, 2020, Edwin Taha and Ali Abdul changed their minds and admitted to their involvement in the fight. Autopsy results from pathologists Dr. Nigel Cooper and Dr. Jennifer Bolton revealed that Luke had consumed alcohol before his death. The amount he drank was likely to cause noticeable signs of intoxication in an average person. The police had released Edwin Taha on bail, and none of the suspects were detained before the trial. The investigation found that the victim had traces of a banned substance in his system, which, combined with alcohol, made him more vulnerable to hypothermia. There were no injuries or evidence of assault, and the deceased did not have any underlying medical conditions that contributed to his death. While the autopsy did not show any signs of eye inflammation or evidence of being sprayed with a substance, witness statements confirmed that the deceased, Luke, was pepper sprayed and struggled to walk and see. The perpetrator, Taha, later bragged about the incident on the high street. The coroner concluded that Luke was incapacitated by the pepper spray. The verdict was announced in October 2020. In an emotional statement, Luke's mother, Lisa Jobson, addressed the court as the individuals responsible for her son's death faced justice. Miss Jobson described the gang that had surrounded her son, Luke, before chasing him through Yarm High Street as a pack of wolves. She explained that from the day Luke was born, he had been loved, cared for, and protected. He had been their world and their only son. They had been extremely close to him, and he had been a kind, gentle, and genuine person who had touched the hearts of everyone he had met. Luke had been a loving and caring individual who had lit up a room with his presence. He had had good friends from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and he hadn't had a mean bone in his body. He had been a positive person who always strived to be his best and had always been looking forward to new experiences. Miss Jobson expressed that they would never forget the terror Luke had faced that night, and the fact that none of the gang members had had the courage to take responsibility for their actions was unbearable. Knowing that their faces had been the last ones Luke had seen on this earth was a constant reminder of the pain and suffering he had endured. It was a living hell for them, and they were left to live with the knowledge that their son hadn't been able to escape safely. At the trial, the lawyer for Abdul's co-defendant stated that Abdul was unaware that Taha possessed pepper spray. He claimed that Abdul did not expect the victim to be assaulted with a weapon. Only one person, not Abdul, knew that Taha had a pepper spray. Taha's lawyer revealed that his client had a difficult childhood, which had led to poor decision-making. On the night of the incident, something was said that triggered a chain of events. Taha acknowledges that the outcome should never have happened. Taha's lawyer also shared that his client had moved to the UK from France at age 4 and had been left to live with a foster family after his mother returned to France. The judge emphasized that neither defendant was directly responsible for the victim's death, but noted that the chase had led to the victim entering the school and boathouse, ultimately resulting in drowning. Taha, 20, was sentenced to 21 months in prison after pleading guilty to a fracas. He also received an additional 4 years and 4 months for charges related to prohibited substances. 19-year-old Abdul, of Corvus Drive in Stockton, has been sentenced to 15 months in prison, suspended for 18 months, after admitting his involvement in an incident that led to the death of Luke. Abdul was also ordered to complete 300 hours of unpaid work. According to the court, Abdul was driving the car that pursued Luke on the night of the incident. The court heard that the altercation started on Yarm High Street, where Luke was chased by a group of males in a vehicle. When they caught up with him, he was sprayed in the eyes with a noxious substance, which had a severe effect on him. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson stated that the altercation had a devastating impact on Luke's family, who have been left without their son and brother. She added that the incident has caused immense pain and hardship for the family, and that nothing can bring Luke back. However, now that the case has concluded, the family may find some closure and be able to move forward with their lives. Charges against 2 other individuals, 19-year-old Ryan Alp and 18-year-old Hamad Asif, were dropped. To summarize the case, Chris Atkinson of the Crown Prosecution Service made a statement after the sentencing in October 2020. He stated that although Taha and Abdul were found guilty, the focus remains on Luke Jobson's family, who may find this time particularly challenging. The prosecution successfully proved that both men were involved in an altercation with Luke before his death. However, it is essential to note that there is no evidence to suggest that their actions directly caused the tragic events that followed the attack. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Wilbanks. Jennifer Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973, in Georgia, where she spent her entire life surrounded by family, friends, and work. It was in Duluth that she met her fiancé, John Mason, who was also 32 years old. John came from a wealthy family that owned a private medical clinic in Duluth. His friends described him as a kind and caring person who was always willing to help those in need. Jennifer and John had been dating for about a year and seemed like the perfect couple. Everyone who knew them was excited when they announced their engagement. The wedding preparations were underway, and a lavish ceremony was planned for April 30, 2005, with several hundred guests invited. However, just 4 days before the wedding, on April 26, 2005, John reported Jennifer's disappearance to the police. He claimed she had gone for an evening run and never returned. John initially tried to find Jennifer on his own but eventually sought help from law enforcement. The next day, April 27th, a massive search operation was launched, involving over 300 police officers and volunteers. They combed through the wooded areas and water bodies along the route Jennifer was supposed to run. Given the urgency of the situation, even off-duty police officers were called in to assist. One of the search teams found potential clues, including clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long, dark hair. All of these findings were sent to the lab for examination. Jennifer's family distributed flyers with her picture and posted them around the city, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The media picked up the story, and billboards with her image appeared around town. The police searched the home she shared with her fiancé, John, but found nothing suspicious. As the investigation continued, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department announced that Jennifer's disappearance was being treated as a criminal case, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation involved. Despite a second day of searching, no signs of Jennifer were found. Her family was shocked and distraught, and they reached out to radio and TV stations to publicize her disappearance, suggesting that she might have been kidnapped and taken out of state. Jennifer's family begged her possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channels extensively covered the story, raising questions about her disappearance. Jennifer was just 4 days away from her wedding. Her relatives, visibly distraught, made emotional appeals during press conferences and interviews. In this photo, a visibly distressed John Mason is shown comforting his mother-in-law. If you're familiar with true crime stories, you may have already pieced together the events surrounding Jennifer's disappearance. As the last person to see Jennifer alive, John became the subject of suspicion when searches yielded no results. Investigators sought to uncover the truth behind John's wholesome image. To those who knew him, he appeared to be a law-abiding citizen who attended church every Sunday and couldn't harm a fly. He was asked to take a lie detector test, but he declined. Instead, he took a private polygraph test with his lawyer present and gave the results to the police. However, this unusual action only heightened the detective's suspicions about John Mason. The test results did not conclusively determine whether John was involved in his fiancée's disappearance. To investigate potential motives, detectives conducted a thorough search of their home and seized 3 computers. Notably, no signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime were found in the house. On the day before the wedding, Jennifer's family offered a $100,000 reward for information that could help find her, either dead or alive. The police held a press conference to announce that they were ending the active search. According to the police chief, they had exhausted all possible leads in the area and found no clues, leading them to call off the search. John Mason attended the press conference but did not speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle speculated that John was simply unsure of what to say, which only fueled speculation about his involvement in her disappearance. Initially, the police found some items, including clothes, shoes, and a lock of hair, that they thought might be connected to Jennifer's disappearance. However, further investigation revealed that these items had no link to her case. The only suspect with a potential motive was John, and journalists were closely following him, making it seem likely that he was involved in her disappearance. However, no concrete evidence had been found. The next day, which was supposed to be Jennifer's wedding day, people gathered to pray for her safe return. On the evening of April 29th, John received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he was shocked to hear Jennifer's voice on the other end. She told him that she had been kidnapped, taken to an unknown location, and forced into a physically intimate situation. She was crying and said that after everything was over, she was released, but now she was lost and didn't know where she was. John was overcome with emotions as he spoke to Jennifer, trying to remain calm to keep her calm as well. He was relieved to know she was alive, but soon, a new development would arise. After talking to John, Jennifer called 911 and reported her alleged kidnapping and release, stating that she was unsure of her location. The police investigation into Jennifer's disappearance led them to a payphone in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 1,400 miles from her hometown of Duluth, Georgia. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Jennifer, who was reunited with her relieved family. The family praised the efforts of the community and the media, believing their attention had persuaded the supposed kidnapper to release Jennifer. However, during her interview at the police station, authorities noticed discrepancies between Jennifer's account of her ordeal and her actual appearance. She claimed to have been held captive by a man and a woman in their 40s, tied up in a blue van. But when FBI agents questioned her, they found numerous inconsistencies in her story. Confronted with these discrepancies, Jennifer confessed that she had fabricated the entire kidnapping. Jennifer had actually left her fiancé, John, by telling him she was going for a run and instead boarded a bus to New Mexico. She explained that she had been overwhelmed by the pressure of her upcoming wedding and couldn't cope. Further investigation revealed that Jennifer had a history of problematic behavior, with 3 prior charges of shoplifting. Jennifer was involved in several incidents of theft before her infamous kidnapping case. In 1996, she stole $37 worth of goods from Walmart. The following year, at the age of 24, she was accused of stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She paid for the damages and completed community service, which led to the theft charges being dropped. However, in 1998, she was caught stealing again, with damages amounting to $98. There were also allegations of theft from families who had hired her as a nanny. These thefts were considered minor, and she managed to avoid imprisonment. After her disappearance and subsequent return, the attention shifted from the thefts to the large-scale search operation conducted by the state of Georgia, which cost nearly $60,000. Jennifer attributed her disappearance to the overwhelming pressure of her impending wedding. With numerous tasks to complete and limited time, she felt stressed and pressured. Authorities later stated that the wedding had become too much for her to handle. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher clarified that Jennifer's fiancé was innocent of any involvement in her disappearance, despite initial suspicions. Jennifer Wilbanks, dubbed the Runaway Bride, apologized publicly to her family, friends, and community for her disappearance. When she returned, her fiancé, John Mason, immediately gave her back the engagement ring she had left behind, signifying his ongoing commitment to their relationship. According to Mason, his commitment to Wilbanks was solidified when he proposed and gave her the ring, regardless of their unfinished wedding plans. Following her return, Wilbanks sought medical treatment to address underlying issues that contributed to her escape. However, her troubles persisted, and she was charged with making false statements related to her disappearance. This led to a guilty plea for perjury, resulting in 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and a restitution payment of over $15,000 to the city. The situation took another turn when Wilbanks sued her now ex-fiancé, John Mason, in 2006. They had ended their engagement, and Wilbanks claimed that Mason had exploited her trust during her treatment by selling the rights to their story for $500,000 without her knowledge. He allegedly used the funds to purchase a house, registered solely in his name, and then kicked her out after their breakup. Wilbanks sought $250,000 as compensation for her share of the house and an additional $250,000 in damages. After the failed wedding, John Mason filed a countersuit against Jennifer Wilbanks, claiming he suffered emotional distress from being left at the wedding and suggesting she might have been involved in her own disappearance. In December 2006, both parties dropped their lawsuits, reportedly as part of a settlement. Meanwhile, Jennifer's notoriety caught the attention of global media, making her a temporary celebrity. In the aftermath, several products emerged, such as a runaway bride action figure and a hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightail and Hot Sauce. A musical play based on her story opened in Duluth, Georgia, in March 2008. Even a photo of her fiancé, John Mason, appeared in the house for the 2008 movie, The Grand. Eventually, John Mason married another woman in 2008 in a small ceremony at his parents' home. Jennifer also got married in 2010, but her marriage ended after 11 years, and she still resides in Georgia. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass were colleagues at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. Living just 6 miles from the hotel, Alice had joined the team 3 weeks prior and quickly formed friendships with her co-workers, particularly Tibor. Born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, Tibor was a people person who loved music, playing almost every instrument, with the piano being his favorite. He had taught his younger sister, Isabella, to play piano, and they would often perform together for their parents. Tragedy struck in 2007 when Tibor's father passed away, leaving the family struggling to cope. Tibor, then a teenager, took on a more significant role in supporting his mother, Rosalia, and younger sister. At 15, he started working full-time to help alleviate his mother's burden. He later applied to the University of Budapest in 2008, hoping a college degree would lead to a better job and greater financial stability for his family. Despite his exceptional talent, Tibor was unfortunately denied admission to the university. Tibor discussed his plans to move to Great Britain with his mother, who seemed to support the idea. In July 2010, at the age of 19, Tibor relocated to the United Kingdom and settled in London. He began working at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel, where he enjoyed his job, responsibilities, and interactions with colleagues and new clients. Tibor quickly formed a bond with Alice, a talented musician, as they often found common topics to discuss. Both Tibor and Alice worked as receptionists at the hotel, along with Attila Ban, a 31-year-old who had been employed there the longest. Attila was recognized as the hotel's best employee in 2010. As Tibor and Attila were both from Hungary, they developed a close relationship. The hotel provided accommodation for its new employees, and Attila and Tibor lived in a company apartment behind the hotel. This arrangement was convenient, as it saved them money and reduced their commute time. Tibor was thrilled to be in England, but he didn't abandon his plans for higher education. He reapplied to the university in Budapest and was accepted this time around. Overjoyed, he had to return to Hungary in August 2011. To bid him farewell, a small party was organized on August 9, 2011, attended by Tibor, Attila, Alice, and other hotel employees. The next day, the trio was scheduled to work, but none of them showed up. Their colleagues raised the alarm when they failed to report for work at 7 a.m., and the police were notified at 7:53 a.m. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the door unlocked and the interior quiet. When an officer opened the door, he was met with a disturbing scene. Alice lay on the living room floor, her face covered by a pillow, with 22 stab wounds on her body, as later confirmed by the medical examiners. In the bedroom, Tibor's naked body was found on the bed, having died from 2 stab wounds to the heart. Attila, however, was nowhere to be found. The police surrounded the house to secure the area, and investigators and forensic experts started their investigation. As they examined the crime scene, they discovered that the bed where Tibor's body was found was not where he was actually killed. The bed was too tidy, indicating that Tibor had met his fate elsewhere. It appeared that the perpetrator had initially wounded him, removed his clothes, cleaned his body, and then placed him on the bed. Upon further inspection, the apartment was found to contain empty alcohol bottles and illicit substances, suggesting that they had been used during a party. Police officers thoroughly searched the house, the surrounding area, and the attic for Attila Ban, but he was nowhere to be found. His personal belongings, including his papers, were still in the apartment. As a result, Attila became the prime suspect in the investigation. While forensic experts continued to analyze the crime scene, investigators began questioning Attila's co-workers at the hotel. The staff reported that Attila had taken a particular interest in Tibor, a new employee from the same country, immediately showing him around and helping him settle in. Attila even went so far as to adjust his work schedule to match Tibor's. Tibor was a young and attractive man who attracted a lot of female attention. However, investigators discovered that Attila had romantic feelings for Tibor, which he openly expressed. According to the hotel staff, Tibor had rejected Attila's advances, making Attila unhappy. Things took a turn for the worse when Alice joined the hotel staff 3 weeks before her death, and Tibor started paying attention to her. Attila became jealous, despite knowing that Tibor was only interested in women. The investigation raised an important question: could Attila have committed the murder out of jealousy and unrequited love? A disturbing Facebook post from Attila, made before the police discovered the bodies, suggested that he was indeed involved. At 6:23 a.m., Attila had posted, "I would like to wake up from that nightmare." Friends commented on the post, expressing their concern, but Attila never responded. This message further solidified the investigators' suspicions that Attila Ban was responsible for the deaths of his colleagues. The number of stab wounds provided a clear indication of what had transpired. Alice sustained 22 stab wounds, while Tibor was stabbed only twice. Furthermore, the positioning of the victims was telling. Alice was found on the floor with a pillow over her face, while Tibor was discovered on the bed. When investigators spoke with the other people who had been at the apartment earlier that night, they learned that Attila, Tibor, and Alice had been the only ones left behind. This suggested that the tragic events had unfolded after the others had left, in the hours leading up to dawn. The news of Alice's death sent shockwaves through the families of both the victim and the perpetrator. The Adams family, Alice's family, released a statement in which her mother, Sarah, paid a heartfelt tribute to her daughter. She expressed her overwhelming grief, saying, "My heart is shattered into a million pieces. I will carry this sadness with me for the rest of my life. I deeply miss my beloved Alice and would do anything to have one more chance to hug her tightly and see her bright smile. The loss of my child has awakened intense emotions within our family, sorrow, anger, and a sense of devastation that we can hardly bear. As a mother, I feel that I failed to protect my child, and that realization is something I must confront every day. Not knowing exactly what happened to Alice on the night of her murder is a constant torment. I would rather face the harsh truth than be left to imagine the sequence of events that led to her death. Alice was an extraordinary and unique individual who brought so much love, joy, passion, and kindness into the lives of everyone she touched. Her loss is a tragedy that cannot be put into words." Meanwhile, police were searching for Attila Ban, but he seemed to have disappeared without a trace. When they attempted to track his phone, they found that it was transmitting signals from the same area as the hotel, which was unusual. It was later revealed that Attila was actually much closer than anyone had suspected. After spending 2 days examining the crime scene, the investigative team left the house, only to have the forensic team return later to conduct additional tests. Upon re-entering the house, they found that the door they had left unlocked was now locked from the inside. Inside the room, they discovered Attila Ban lying on the bed, intoxicated and wounded after attempting to harm himself with scissors and a knife. The investigators questioned Attila, but he responded bizarrely, using gestures to convey his thoughts. He was then taken to the hospital for medical attention. Unbeknownst to the investigators, Attila had created a hiding space within the sofa bed where Tibor Vasa's body was found. To create this makeshift hiding spot, he had made a slit in the bed's base, grabbed a phone, several bottles of water, and climbed inside. Throughout the investigation, Attila had been secretly watching and listening to the police through the holes he had made. Attila Ban was arrested at the hospital as the main suspect in the crime. His trial began on July 9, 2012, and during the proceedings, details of the heinous crime were revealed. The party had escalated out of control after Tibor, Alice, and Attila were left alone in the apartment. Prosecutors confirmed that there was a consensual physical encounter between the three, with DNA evidence found on Miss Adams' body. The evening took a devastating turn. Attila claimed to have no memory of the events that followed, only recalling waking up the next morning to find Alice and Tibor lifeless. Overcome with guilt and remorse, he considered taking his own life but was too afraid to do so alone. The court learned that Attila had been consumed by jealousy towards Tibor, particularly after a team-building event where he had thrown a tantrum because Tibor was in a photograph and he was not. The situation worsened when Attila discovered that Tibor had been accepted into a university program in Hungary and would be leaving the UK soon. The final trigger was likely witnessing Tibor and Alice kissing, which sent Attila into a fit of rage, ultimately leading him to take the lives of his two friends. Prosecutor Richard Whittam revealed in court that Attila Ban was discovered naked on a single bed, with injuries to his wrists, forearm, and neck. It was later found that he had been hiding in the base of a double bed. Remarkably, he had managed to conceal himself and remain undetected throughout the entire investigation, including the pathologist's examination, the removal of the bodies, and the crime scene examiner's investigation. When questioned about the oversight, Detective Inspector John Finch defended the police, stating that it would be impractical and potentially damaging to lift up every bed in search of people. He explained that this could result in the loss of crucial forensic evidence and was not a standard procedure in such cases. Rosalia, the mother of Tibor Vas, paid a heartfelt tribute to her son, remembering him as a friendly, outgoing, and talented young man. She recalled his childhood interests in music, arts, and sports, as well as his passion for photography, which led him to invest in a professional camera with his first paycheck. According to Rosalia, Tibor had many friends in both Hungary and the UK who appreciated his kind and supportive nature. She said that, on August 11th, I received devastating news. My 20-year-old son, Tibor, and his friend Alice, had been murdered. The killer was a shocking revelation, Tibor's own friend, who I had trusted to look out for my son. This friend had personally promised to keep Tibor safe, which made the news even more difficult to accept. Days before the murder, I had taken comfort in knowing that Tibor had found a mature and intelligent friend in London. Now, I was consumed by grief and struggled to comprehend the tragedy. The subsequent police investigation and trial only added to my suffering, forcing me to relive the horrors of that fateful night. The pain and loss my family experiences will stay with us for the rest of our lives. The perpetrator, Attila Ban, pleaded guilty but claimed he couldn't recall the details of the crime. On July 18, 2012, the jury delivered a guilty verdict after just 5 hours of deliberation. A month later, on August 17, Attila Ban was sentenced to 2 life terms. He will have to serve 26 years before being eligible for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kani Alm. Kani Alm was born on July 18, 1974, in Malaysia. She was the younger of two daughters and enjoyed a very close relationship with her parents. In 1995, Canny moved to the United States to pursue higher education and a career in information technology. While living in the United States, Canny met a man named Brandon. He was a U.S. citizen and an ethnic Chinese whose parents emigrated from Singapore over 20 years ago. Initially, Canny and Brandon were just friends, but their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Brandon became a significant figure in Canny's life, supporting and helping her in various ways. They got married in 2001. Canny's life was on track in 2003. She was working as an analyst in San Diego, planning a future with her husband, and hoping to start a family. Her life changed dramatically that year. The trouble began when Canny's father, Ong Bai-yung, was diagnosed with cancer. Canny decided to fly to Malaysia to support her family during this difficult time. On June 1, 2003, Canny and her husband, Brandon, arrived in Malaysia. However, Brandon returned to the USA after a few days, leaving Canny to care for her father in Kuala Lumpur. Despite the distance, Canny and Brandon stayed close through daily phone calls. They would talk for hours, sharing stories about their daily lives, including their two pets. Canny's father underwent surgery to remove a kidney, but fortunately, his health began to recover. As he improved, Canny planned her return to the USA, scheduling a flight for June 14, 2003. Canny organized a farewell dinner at a local restaurant the evening before her departure, and she invited her mother, sister, and closest friends to join her. That evening, June 13, 2003, Canny and her mother arrived at the designated meeting spot later than the others. They had trouble finding a parking spot in front of the mall, so Canny parked in the underground lot. However, her mother was concerned about the poor lighting in the lot, rather than the parking fee. Once they arrived at the second-floor restaurant, Canny was excited to reunite with her childhood friends, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. They spent a few hours catching up, but Canny soon noticed that her mother, Pearlie, was starting to look tired. When Canny asked if her mother wanted to head home, Pearlie said she had a lot to do that day, but was okay with leaving early and promised her friends she would be back soon. Canny, her mother, and her sister Elsie got up from the table to pay for their parking. They went to the payment terminal, which was located on the first floor, a floor above the underground parking lot. As they waited in line for the terminal, Canny realized she had left the parking ticket in their car. She asked her sister and mother to stay in line while she went back down to retrieve the ticket. Elsie and Pearlie waited for 10 more minutes, but Canny still hadn't returned. Then, her sister started calling her. The first call went unanswered, and the second one was sent to voicemail. This was unusual, and Elsie and Pearlie immediately sensed that something was wrong. They quickly went to the parking lot, where they were shocked to find that Canny's car was no longer there. They searched the parking lot several times to make sure, and after confirming that the car was indeed gone, they realized that Canny must have disappeared along with it. Pearlie was certain that something had happened to her daughter, as Canny would never leave without saying anything. Although the parking lot was poorly lit, it had surveillance cameras that might provide some clues about what had happened. The mall security initially refused to show Canny's relatives the footage, but relented after her mother begged for their help. At midnight, Pearlie and Elsie sat in front of a monitor and watched the shocking footage, which confirmed their worst fears. The footage revealed Canny's car speeding out of the underground parking lot, crashing through the barrier. Although the footage quality was poor, it was evident that a man was driving, with Canny in the passenger seat. Her body was positioned as if she was trying to distance herself from the driver, leaning against the door. Upon seeing the footage, Pearlie immediately filed a disappearance and kidnapping report at a police station. The police launched an investigation, while Canny's family and friends drove around Kuala Lumpur, desperately searching for her purple proton tiara. Meanwhile, Brandon, Kenny's husband, began to feel a sense of unease. He tried calling his wife multiple times, but she didn't answer. He then contacted her mother, who informed him about the events that had transpired. The news of Kenny's disappearance left Brandon in shock. Pearlie could hear him sobbing over the phone. As dawn broke, Kenny's friends and family reluctantly returned home, their search efforts having yielded no results. The police disseminated information about the disappearance and conducted their own search, but unfortunately, it didn't lead to any breakthroughs. Even the footage from the mall's parking lot where Kenny was kidnapped failed to provide any leads on identifying the driver of the car. More than 72 hours have passed since Kenny's loved ones last saw her. Authorities believe that if she was kidnapped, it wasn't for ransom. If money was the motive, the kidnapper would have demanded it by now. A disturbing find was made by police when they discovered Kenny's car left empty on a city street. The front right tire was severely damaged, indicating it had been driven on while flat for some time, causing it to shred. In the back of the car, a large red stain was found on the passenger seat. Forensic experts collected evidence, including scrapings from the back seat, fingerprints from the steering wheel, and other parts of the car. There were many clues found in the vehicle. Kenny's family and friends held on to hope and prayed for her safe return. However, their hopes were crushed the next day after her car was found. On June 17th, a road worker detected a strong, foul smell coming from a manhole near the highway. Upon lifting the lid, he discovered a body that someone had attempted to burn using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of leading forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police immediately arrived at the scene. They found 2 car tires filled with concrete, which had been used as stands for road signs, lying on top of the body. It appeared that whoever had hidden the body, trying to make it harder to identify. Although the discovery of the body seemed to confirm the family's worst fears, Kenny's mother, Pearlie, refused to believe that her daughter was dead without official confirmation. "Until they confirm it, we will continue to hope that she will turn up alive," she said. The family went to the morgue, but the doctor said that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body yet. Kenny's family members provided DNA samples for comparative analysis. Unfortunately, the results confirmed their worst nightmare: the body was indeed that of their daughter, Kenny. Some sources claim that before the DNA test results, Kenny's family identified the jewelry on the body. However, as a loving mother, Pearlie held on to the hope that her daughter was still alive until the very end. The emotional torture she endured is unimaginable. The autopsy revealed that Kenny had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen, and a medical forensics expert found signs of strangulation. A cloth was tied around her neck in multiple knots, and semen was found inside her body, which served as a source of DNA. A few days after the body was discovered, an incident raised questions about the work of police. An undercover policeman, Subramaniam Ravichandran, reported to his superiors that on the night of Kenny's disappearance, he was on duty with his partner, patrolling the streets of Kuala Lumpur at night on their motorcycles. Both officers were dressed in civilian clothes. They noticed a car parked incorrectly, taking up half the road, and stopped to investigate if anyone was inside. Ravichandran approached the driver's door and saw a man behind the wheel with a woman in the passenger seat. He knocked on the window, and when the man lowered it partially, Ravichandran displayed his police ID and asked what they were doing. The driver replied they were just chatting and not doing anything illegal. Ravichandran then requested to see their IDs. As the driver handed over the documents, she in the passenger seat made unusual hand gestures, seemingly asking for help, but stopped whenever her assumed boyfriend looked at her. Noticing this, Ravichandran asked the driver to step out of the car. However, the driver responded aggressively, claiming Ravichandran was not a police officer but a thief. He then raised the window and reached for the ignition. Realizing the car might drive off, Ravichandran drew his pistol and shot the right front wheel. Despite this, the car sped away. Ravichandran and his partner pursued on a motorcycle but were unable to catch up, which is puzzling given the car had a flat tire. At the time, the Malaysian Police Department was in a state of disarray, which might explain why the officer didn't call for backup or report the incident. The car with a flat tire was a purple Proton Tiara, driven by 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris, accompanied by a woman named Kani Alm. Although the police chase did not result in an immediate arrest, the officers managed to obtain documents from the driver. Tragically, Kani Alm was later found dead. It is possible that if the officer had acted differently during the encounter, the outcome might have been different. Unfortunately, Ravichandran only informed his superiors about the incident after Kani's body was discovered. The only positive outcome of that night was that the police had obtained documents that could help identify the suspect. Besides Kani's family, many Malaysians attended her farewell ceremony. Her death was a devastating loss for her husband, Brandon. Meanwhile, the police launched a search for Ahmad Najib. They discovered that he didn't live at the address listed in his documents, but his name was genuine, providing multiple leads to track him down. The police searched for Ahmad Najib's name in the Registry of Documented Marriages and the National Agency of Social Support. They found a match, revealing that Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and raised in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 siblings and had dropped out of school to work and support his family. In 1998, he moved from Muar to Kuala Lumpur, where he got married and had 2 children. Since 2000, he had worked as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing the name of Ahmad Najib's wife and her workplace, the police began surveillance. She worked at a metropolitan bank, and after her shift ended, undercover police officers followed her to determine her home address. Now that they knew where Ahmad Najib lived, the police had to ensure he was inside the house without alerting him. For 3 days, they monitored the house, but Ahmad Najib didn't appear. At one point, investigators doubted whether Ahmad Najib still lived with his family, but this was a hasty conclusion. On the 4th day of surveillance, at around 4 a.m., a cab pulled up to the house, and Ahmad Najib stepped out. Within a minute, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. News of the arrest and the suspect's identity quickly reached the press. Many people who knew Ahmad Najib were shocked to learn that he was suspected of kidnapping and killing Kani Alm. Those who knew him described Ahmad Najib as a devoted husband, a caring father of 2, and an overall good person. However, investigators soon discovered that he may have been hiding a darker side. During the initial interrogation, Ahmad Najib remained calm and requested to speak only with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. It wasn't until he was presented with evidence linking him to Kani Alm that Ahmad Najib began to deny any wrongdoing. His confidence seemed to wane as the evidence mounted. Investigators showed him 2 IDs that he had given to an officer on the night of Kani Alm's kidnapping. They also revealed that they had found bloodstains on his jacket and jeans, which DNA analysis would likely confirm to be Kani Alm's blood. After realizing the officers had solid evidence and were not bluffing, Ahmad Najib confessed to kidnapping and killing Kani Alm. Within 10 days of the kidnapping, on June 23, 2003, he was taken to court, where he repeated his confession. The police then conducted an investigative experiment where Ahmad Najib showed them all the locations he had been with Kani Alm. He provided a detailed account of how he forced her to be intimate with him multiple times, how he took her life, and how he attempted to dispose of her body. Evidence supporting his statements was found at all the locations he led the police to. The investigation began at the underground parking lot, where cameras captured footage of Ahmad Najib. According to his statement, he was waiting for his former boss, who had fired him and whom he sought revenge against. However, the claim about the former boss was never verified. Hiding in the darkness, He observed Canny Ong searching for something in her car and seized the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. He forcefully pushed her into the car, issuing threats that if she attempted to escape or seek help, she would face dire consequences. Overwhelmed, Canny Ong became disoriented and obediently followed his instructions. Next, he took the driver's seat and sped out of the parking lot. After crashing through a barrier, he stopped in an industrial area, where he began to harass Canny Ong. Just as this was happening, a plainclothes police officer approached the car. Ahmad Najib falsely told the officer that he didn't know he had taken the wrong person until the officer asked him and his victim for their identification. Even assuming Ahmad Najib had intended to kidnap his former boss, his guilt remains unchanged. Undoubtedly, his former boss would have suffered the same fate as Canny Ong. According to Ahmad Najib's account, he managed to evade the pursuing officer. Despite the officer possessing his documents, Ahmad Najib failed to consider releasing Canny Ong. Instead, he stopped the car on the street to replace a tire damaged by a bullet. Nearby, a car containing a woman was parked at the spot where he had pulled over. He approached she and asked for a car jack, intending to change his tire. However, he noticed Canny Ong signaling to she, who then handed him the jack. He abandoned the idea of changing the tire and drove off immediately. Later, he stopped at a secluded area and used a knife to threaten Canny Ong, forcing her to engage in intimate acts with him. Afterwards, he drove to another district where he coerced Canny Ong into satisfying him again, with both of them in the back seat. Canny Ong pleaded for mercy, but he took her life instead. He then disposed of her body in a manhole near a highway, moved the car to another location, and left it there. 16 hours later, he returned to the scene with a gasoline canister in an attempt to conceal evidence of the crime. DNA analysis confirmed that the semen found in Canny Ong's body belonged to Ahmad Najib bin Aris. His DNA was also discovered in the car, along with his fingerprints, providing further irrefutable proof of his guilt. Additionally, the analysis revealed that the blood on his jacket and jeans belonged to Canny Ong. The trial began on September 15, 2003, 3 months after Canny Ong's death. This high-profile case drew widespread attention from the Malaysian media and public. The trial attracted not only ordinary Malaysians and journalists but also individuals seeking to boost their reputation, including numerous attorneys representing Ahmad Najib. Despite admitting guilt during the investigation, overwhelming evidence, including DNA proof, Ahmad Najib changed his stance after consulting 6 attorneys. At his first trial, he claimed his confession was made under police pressure. However, the judge before whom Ahmad Najib confessed immediately after his arrest testified that there were no signs of physical abuse, and Ahmad Najib appeared calm and relaxed. The attorneys then shifted their strategy, arguing that Canny Ong was in the car with Ahmad Najib voluntarily. They suggested that Canny Ong, a black belt in Taekwondo, should have attempted to escape if she were being held against her will. However, this attempt to blame Canny Ong was rejected, as people respond differently to critical situations. However, another claim surfaced, stating that Canny Ong had consensual intimacy with Ahmad Najib and that Canny Ong's death was caused by strangulation used to heighten the experience. Forensic experts disagreed with and rejected this account of what happened. The cloth around Canny's neck was tied in multiple knots, suggesting that Canny Ong had no intention of loosening it. Indeed, the cloth was so tight that the skin beneath was the only area on the body not affected by the fire. Furthermore, the cloth was a type used for cleaning plane windows, and given the defendant's job as a cabin cleaner, this linked him more closely to the crime. Additionally, the lawyers struggled to explain the stab wounds on Canny's body. At this point, Ahmad Najib's attorneys advised him to remain silent and not testify. Many questioned why Canny didn't escape the car when she had at least 2 chances to do so. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib bin Aris was convicted of all charges connected to the crime committed against Kani Aum. The evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Ahmad Najib received the maximum sentence under Malaysian law, 20 years imprisonment and 10 strokes of the cane for violating Kani Aum's sexual integrity, plus the death penalty for causing her death. In Malaysia, the death penalty is carried out by hanging, a method that differs significantly from the lethal injection used in some other countries, such as the USA. Ahmad Najib's lawyers attempted to appeal the sentence twice but were unsuccessful both times. In 2010, Ahmad Najib petitioned the head of state to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment, maintaining his innocence. However, his plea for clemency was rejected. More than 13 years after Kani Aum's death, on September 23, 2016, Ahmad Najib's sentence was carried out. He was 40 years old at the time of his execution. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Natasha Kornoyer. Natasha Kornoyer, 37 years old, has gone missing suddenly and without any notice. She didn't visit her mother, respond to phone calls, or return home. As the day went on, it became clear that none of her friends or colleagues had seen her either. Her worried relatives reported her missing at 5 p.m., prompting a police investigation. Natasha worked as a public relations specialist for the Correctional Service of Canada. Detectives began by interviewing her co-workers. Upon arrival, they found her car still parked nearby. A nervous-looking man, Michel Trottier, was standing by her vehicle. He claimed to be in a relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. The back door of Natasha's car had scratches, but it was unclear if they were related to her disappearance. With no reason to suspect Michel Trottier of involvement, detectives continued their investigation. Co-workers reported that Natasha was at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. She seemed to be in a good mood, friendly, and untroubled, with no signs of anything amiss. On October 2, Natasha needed a day off to deal with issues related to her recently deceased father's tombstone. To make up for time, she worked longer hours on October 1 and left the office around 8 p.m. According to her friends, Natasha was a kind and open person with no known conflicts or enemies. The police launched a large-scale search for Natasha, involving aviation and canine units. Initially, they focused on the area around the parking lot but found no clues to aid the investigation. Natasha's friends and relatives distributed flyers with her photo, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The first few hours after a person goes missing are crucial in finding witnesses or evidence. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police weren't notified until the evening of October 2, 21 hours after she left work. The search for Natasha took place from October 3 to 5, but unfortunately, no leads were found. Her family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Natasha's boyfriend, Michel Trottier, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea for her safe release. Meanwhile, the police were investigating their personal lives. They had been together for 4 years, but their relationship had been rocky, with multiple breakups and reconciliations. The police explored all possible scenarios surrounding Natasha's disappearance. They reviewed CCTV footage from her workplace, both inside and outside the building. The footage showed Natasha arriving at 9:04 a.m. and leaving at 8:07 p.m. She had parked her car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot, and the cameras captured her walking towards it. However, she eventually disappeared from view due to the darkness. After a few minutes, the car headlights turned on and the car started moving, but instead of heading towards the exit, it drove to the opposite side of the parking lot, which was also poorly lit. The car stopped and the headlights went out. The vehicle remained in this position for about 20 minutes before moving towards the exit. It was determined that this car was not Natasha's, as she owned a Mazda. Further investigation revealed that the car in the video was a Ford Windstar minivan, which had entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked next to Natasha's car. Based on the video footage, the police concluded that Natasha Conoyer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. On the fifth day of the search, October 6, 2009, the focus shifted from finding a missing person to investigating a homicide. Natasha's body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Point Aux Trumbull area, approximately 20 miles from her workplace. The body was located next to a dirt road that led to the riverbank. The news of Natasha's death devastated her relatives and friends, who were further disturbed by the medical examiner's report. According to the report, Natasha's cause of death was strangulation. Additionally, she had suffered 9 facial injuries, including a broken nose, and had marks on her wrists and ankles indicating that she had been bound. Seminal fluid was also found inside her body, which would serve as a source of DNA evidence. While awaiting DNA analysis results, detectives attempted to identify the owner of a minivan captured on camera the day Natasha vanished. In 2009, there were 2 motels near Natasha's workplace. On October 16, 2009, 10 days after her body was discovered, police visited both motels to review guest registration cards. At the Lido Motel, they found a guest who had registered a Ford Windstar. The guest was 48 years old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with 2 prior convictions. In 1993, Claude was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 2 years of probation for coercing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sex. In 2005, he received a 40-month prison sentence for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl. She managed to escape and run to a neighbor's house. Claude's 40-month sentence for the attempted kidnapping of a child raises questions about the severity of his punishment. In November 2008, Claude was released and started working as a carpenter. He married a woman with 2 sons, and they all lived together in a house about a 10-minute drive from where Natasha Conoyer disappeared. Detectives found out Claude checked into a motel the night Natasha went missing. Forensic experts examined the motel room and discovered dark red stains on the carpet, which they sent for analysis. The same day, detectives visited Claude at his home. Since he had a prior prison record, the police already had his DNA on file. However, they needed time to compare it to the DNA found on Natasha's body. Claude claimed he didn't know Natasha but admitted to frequently visiting the Lido Motel because it was cheap. He told the detectives he was unhappy with his intimate life with his wife and often rented a motel room to meet women offering paid sex services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha disappeared, Claude said he couldn't remember anything, including staying at the Lido Motel. He attributed his memory loss to excessive substance use, but his memory partially returned soon after. On November 5, 2009, a month after the body was discovered, detectives returned to Claude LaRouche's house. This time, however, it was not for a conversation. DNA analysis revealed that the seminal fluid found in Natasha Conoyer's body matched LaRouche's. Additionally, Natasha's DNA was detected in the motel room Claude rented and inside his car. Montreal police say there's no link between the crime and Conoyer's job at Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim didn't know the suspect. Following Claude's arrest, Montreal Police Inspector Daniel Rousseau stated that citizens could now feel safer in public. The news of the arrest shocked Claude's neighbors, who described him as a friendly and polite individual. The next day, on November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche became a suspect in Natasha Conoyer's case. Initially, he denied any wrongdoing, but faced with substantial evidence, he confessed to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed her death was accidental and not intentional. During his 2011 trial, two differing accounts of the events emerged, one from Claude and his defense team, and the other from the prosecution. According to Claude's testimony, he was waiting in a parking lot for a drug dealer on the evening in question. While sitting in his car, Natasha appeared beside him. He then attacked her, forced her into his vehicle, and shut the door. Afterwards, Claude conversed with Natasha, and she allegedly agreed to accompany him to a motel. Claude LaRouche experienced memory lapses, which left him unable to recall why he stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes or what he did during that time. However, he conveniently remembered specific moments that worked in his favor. According to LaRouche, Natasha offered to satisfy his demands in exchange for her freedom while they were in the motel room. He agreed, but after she fulfilled his requests, they got into an argument. Claude lost control, attacked Natasha, and ultimately strangled her. He then cleaned the room, moved her body to his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, after the substances he had taken wore off, he realized the gravity of his actions. Claude chose to get rid of Natasha's body. As he drove to the location where the body was later found, he cut her documents and bank cards into pieces and threw them out the car window. However, it's crucial to remember that this account comes from LaRouche himself, and the more he shared, the more inconsistencies and questions emerged about his claims. According to Claude's testimony, the day after disposing of Natasha's body, he returned to the scene and covered her with a blanket, fearing she would freeze. He revisited the body again the next day to retrieve the blanket, worried that it would hinder her discovery. LaRouche's statements suggest that his actions were influenced by a clouded consciousness, leading to illogical decisions. He claimed he did not intend to take Natasha's life, which he attempted to convey to those present during the trial. The prosecution's case relied on physical evidence and a witness testimony. The witness stated that while walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha disappeared, he saw Claude attempt to attack a jogger around 7 p.m. However, Claude retreated when he noticed the witness and his dog. Natasha Conoyer was attacked an hour later. The prosecutor was convinced that Claude had bound and abducted Natasha, taking her to a motel where she ultimately lost her life. In June 2011, Claude LaRouche was found guilty and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that just 2 weeks after Natasha's murder, Claude attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel. However, she managed to fend him off by biting his finger. As a result, Claude was deemed a dangerous offender under Canadian law, rendering his prison sentence indefinite and significantly reducing his chances of early parole. Natasha had a peaceful and fulfilling life, with aspirations and objectives, all of which were brutally taken away by a man with a history of serious crimes. Despite his past, Claude was allowed to roam free, living among the community without adequate supervision. The fact that he had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl raises questions about how he was able to reintegrate into society without proper monitoring. Natasha's loved ones continue to grapple with these unanswered questions, haunted by the thought that if the system had functioned correctly and Claude had been held accountable, Natasha might still be alive today. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Kat West. Kat West was born on February 15, 1975, in the small town of Davie, Florida. She was the only child of Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Kat always wanted a sibling, but her mother's health problems made that impossible. This has made Kat West so attached to her dolls, she treats them like living creatures, sings to them and cherishes them. Kat West was a popular student in school, admired for her good looks and friendly personality. She was very active in extracurricular activities, particularly sports and dance. However, during the teenage years, signs of bipolar affective disorder begin to appear, characterized by depression and anxiety, alternating with periods of hyperactivity, persistently elevated mood and agitation. Only later did her parents realize their daughter's condition, but it was too late. By then, she had turned to alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she sought treatment for her addiction that doctors discovered the underlying issue, a bipolar disorder. Despite overcoming her dependency on alcohol, managing her bipolar disorder proved to be a much more daunting task. She was on multiple medications, which caused unpleasant side effects and made her feel unwell. Eventually, the disorder was brought under control, but Kat West had to continue taking medication. Kat West wants to get married and have children, but her personal life is full of hardship, possibly due to her past mental illness and addiction. However, Kat West is a charismatic and attractive person, has many admirers, is often the life of the party and shines in the spotlight. Growing up, Kat West aspired to be a model. She actively pursued her goal, spending time attending auditions and exploring different looks. She was especially attracted to Marilyn Monroe, an actress of the style of the 1950s. Kat West has watched many of Monroe's films, collected her posters and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Kat West bore a resemblance to her idol, which she proudly acknowledged and cherished. Although her dream of becoming a famous model didn't come true, Kat West's photos were frequently published in local magazines, earning her some recognition, a fan base, and occasional recognition on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she met her life partner, William Jeffrey West. William was born in 1970 in Alabama, came from a typical family. From a young age, he had aspirations of a career in the military or law enforcement. As a diligent student and active sports enthusiast, he was robust, fit, and incredibly focused. In the early 1990s, William joined the U.S. military, initially serving as a military police officer. His dedication led to a promotion as a military recruiter, responsible for enlisting individuals into the Army and Navy. He was eventually promoted to head of a recruiting unit, spending 20 years of his life in military service. William pursued higher education alongside his military career, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina. He then went on to study criminal justice, eventually earning a master's degree. William is a calm and goal-oriented person who likes to keep a low profile. He was a devoted family man, marrying young and having 2 children. After retiring from the military, he became a corporal in the police department of a university town, where he was responsible for ensuring the safety of the campus community. He approached his duties with seriousness and responsibility, never having to use his service firearm throughout his career. Kat West and William first met in the mid-2000s, when William was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their vastly different personalities, William is a quiet and serious military man, and Kat West is a bubbly and outgoing blonde, and they feel an immediate attraction to each other. In 2004, William, a married man at the time, met Kat West. Despite their 5-year age gap and Kat West struggles with alcohol addiction, but they quickly fell in love. William soon filed for divorce to be with Kat West, and in less than 5 months, they got married in Las Vegas in 2005. After getting married, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lola. They moved to Sarah, Alabama, William's home state, where Kat designed their custom-built home, adorning their bedroom with portraits of her idol, Marilyn Monroe. Neighbors described the Williams as a happy couple, despite their very different personalities. Kat West was known for her bold fashion sense, always striving to look stunning and attractive. She loved being the center of attention, often seeking compliments and admiring glances. In contrast, William appeared more reserved and serious, a trait likely developed during his long military career. Kat West's life is a complete contrast to her glamorous appearance and her everyday reality as a housewife. Despite her efforts to make it big in modeling, her career failed to take off after her marriage and the birth of her daughter. Focusing on creating a cozy home and raising her children became her top priorities. However, her domestic life wasn't fulfilling, and she yearned for attention and recognition. With the emergence of social media in the late 2000s, she began sharing pictures online. She was inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe, but gradually became more daring and provocative. Her husband was surprisingly supportive of her new hobby, often serving as her photographer. Eventually, the hobby became a profitable business, earning her income through paid subscriptions. A typical evening found they shopping for prepared seafood, fine brandy, and absinthe from a local supermarket. They would pick out scented candles from a nearby store to set the mood for a romantic evening. Surveillance cameras caught them seemingly carefree and happy as they made their purchases, unaware of the tragedy that was about to happen. After a fun dinner and a few drinks, Kat West began transforming into her online persona, Kitty Cat. She asked Williams to take some intimate photos of her, first in lingerie and then without clothes. Williams agreed and took several revealing shots, which were later posted on Kat West's private online profile, accessible only to her fans. A romantic evening that seemed to end in a night of passion instead led to a tragic ending. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Williams was on her way to work. Although the sun had not yet risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Williams house. At first, she didn't realize what it was, but as she slowed down, she saw a nearly naked woman lying motionless on the road. She also thought she saw someone standing on the doorstep of the house, but they quickly disappeared into the shadows when they noticed her approaching. During questioning, the neighbor was unable to definitively state whether she saw Kat West's attacker enter the house or flee down the street. The neighbor, who was shocked and unsure of what to do, hesitated to approach the body. After returning home, she informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report the distressing discovery. At the operator's request, the neighbor reluctantly approached the body while waiting for help to arrive. She identified the body as Kat West and checked for a pulse, but unfortunately, there was none. Kat West's body was cold and stiff. Kat West was found lying face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a bright pink bra top. There was a pool of blood under her head. Nearby was a bottle of wormwood wine with some of the wine spilled on the road and blood stains on the bottle. A short distance away lay her smashed smartphone. Due to the quiet residential area, there were no other witnesses to the incident, which remains shrouded in mystery. Kat West's car was last seen around 8:30 p.m. and the time her body was discovered at 5 a.m. A key figure who may be able to shed some light on the events is Kat West's husband, Mr. Williams. The investigation is ongoing, with Detective Michael Melhoff being one of the first to arrive at the scene. When the detective arrived at the house where Kat West's body was found, Williams answered the door. He seemed anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When asked about his wife's whereabouts, Williams said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then told him that a woman's body, identified by neighbors as Kat West, had been found near the house. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective outside, where he confirmed that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't show any extreme emotions, such as crying or screaming, which raised some suspicions. When questioned about his whereabouts and activities during the night, he said he had slept soundly because they had been drinking the previous evening. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also shared some information about his wife's medical history. He said she had bipolar disorder and took medication for it. He also mentioned that she struggled with alcohol and sometimes behaved erratically when she was drunk. He noted that she would occasionally jump on their backyard trampoline, but sometimes missed it and injured herself. A search of the house did not turn up any signs of a struggle or violence. However, some items in the kitchen suggested a recent gathering. 2 plates with leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle were on the kitchen table. Under the table, police found Kat West's high heels and a pair of panties the same color as her bra lying on the floor. However, some bloody napkins in the trash and an open bottle of detergent raised suspicions. Williams claimed that on the evening in question, Kat West had been drinking heavily, which he disliked. After a photo session, he wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He took a short shower and returned to find Kat West still sitting at the table, drinking absinthe straight from the bottle and texting someone on her phone. Williams was angry that she ignored his requests to put away her phone, and he tried to take it from her. A minor scuffle ensued, during which he accidentally elbowed Kat West's face, causing her nose to bleed. Williams explained that the blood on the discarded napkins could have been the blood from his wife's nose that night. He stated that he took the phone from his wife and threw it out the door. Believing his wife would calm down and join him in bed, he claimed to have been unaware of what happened next until the police arrived at his door asking about Kat West. Williams speculated that his wife might have gone outside to retrieve her phone and brought the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. He suggested 2 possible scenarios: 1, that she fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and froze to death, or 2, that someone attacked her. However, he could not explain why his wife went out wearing only a bra without any clothes. He attributed this behavior to her being intoxicated from the absinthe. Williams's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and lack of detail, which he attributed to intoxication. However, the investigation was hampered by lack of evidence and no witnesses. The autopsy revealed that the 42-year-old woman died from a severe head injury, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, combined with hypothermia. Her blood alcohol level was extremely high, suggesting severe intoxication can impair breathing and increase the risk of loss of consciousness. Initially, it seemed that the circumstances of Kat West's death were straightforward. She had been heavily intoxicated, gone outside to search for her phone, and taken the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. It appeared that she might have lost her balance while reaching for her phone, fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and ultimately died from the injury and exposure. The presence of the blood-stained bottle near her head and the phone nearby seemed to support this scenario. Yet, the investigation discovered that this explanation was overly simplistic and potentially staged. Experts determined that the head injury was caused by the bottle found next to the body. However, forensic analysis revealed that if the victim had fallen by herself, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, rather than remaining parallel to it. The bottle was found to have both Kat West's and her husband Williams's fingerprints on it, as well as some unidentified smudged prints. Further investigation led to a different conclusion. The theory presented in court suggested that Kat West and Williams had an argument. In a fit of anger, Williams allegedly struck her with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to stage an accidental fall and cleaned up the blood in the house, but failed to dispose of all the evidence. Evidence supporting this theory included a fitness app on Williams's phone, which tracked his movements. The app showed that Williams was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived. This contradicted his claim of being asleep, leading police to speculate that he was trying to conceal evidence during these times. A neighbor who discovered the body recalled seeing a male silhouette on the doorstep of the house in the early morning hours. However, due to the dim light, she couldn't be certain if it was Williams or someone else. She also couldn't determine if the person entered the house. This information piqued the investigators' interest, especially given Cat West's online persona, Kitty Cat, which had attracted many male admirers who paid to see her revealing photos. This theory suggests that a highly devoted fan may have been responsible. As a homemaker, Cat West often received messages from various men, including some with inappropriate proposals. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment found in their communications. A few persistent fans who lived in other states were quickly ruled out as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep, which didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, and their origin remained unknown. Friends, relatives, and neighbors described the Williams family as a happy couple, and he knew her online activities under the name Kitty Cat. While some might have seen it as unusual, he treated it as harmless fun. Their social circle was unaware of Cat West's online persona, just as most of her followers didn't know her real-life identity. Williams firmly denied ever abusing his wife, saying he loved her so much that harming her was impossible. However, they frequently argued, and a text exchange from January 12 revealed a heated dispute. Cat West criticized Williams for not matching her energy and temperament, suggesting they might be incompatible. Despite the lack of direct evidence, Williams remained the prime suspect. Following his arrest, his family and defense attorneys rallied to his defense, believing he was innocent. They insisted that he could never hurt his wife. After his arrest, Williams was unable to afford the $500,000 bail and had to stay in custody until his trial, which took almost 3 years. He was offered a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence, but he refused, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, drew significant media attention. This publicity put pressure on the judges and jurors. By this time, the possibility of a third party's involvement in Cat West's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence indicated that Williams was responsible for his wife Cat West's death. They believed that, fueled by jealousy and intoxicated, he hit her with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In an attempt to cover his tracks, they suggested he staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. In contrast, Williams's defense team claimed that Cat West's death was an accident. They pointed out that her extremely high blood alcohol levels would have impaired her balance and coordination. Cat West's mother testified in support of Williams, describing her daughter as eccentric but stressing that Williams loved her unconditionally and would never harm her. She also appealed to the court to consider the well-being of their child, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father. On January 11, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter. As a result, Williams received the maximum sentence of 13 years in prison, taking into account the time he had already served. Notably, if he had accepted the initial plea deal offered to him, he may have already been a free man by now. Unfortunately, all of Williams's appeals, led by his lawyers, have been unsuccessful thus far. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Jessica Patel. Jessica Patel was born on September 16, 1983, in Leeds, West Yorkshire, England, where she grew up in a traditional Hindu community. As the eldest child, she developed a diligent and obedient nature from a young age. Jessica excelled academically, helped with household chores, and maintained a bright and cheerful personality. Jessica had a large social circle, but she was particularly close to a boy 3 years her senior, who was more reserved and shy. They often spent time together, and as Jessica matured, she blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Like many of her peers, she longed to find true love and build a happy family, much like the characters in her favorite movies. However, her romantic aspirations did not detract from her intelligence and determination. To achieve her goals, Jessica pursued higher education. In 2002, she enrolled at De Montfort University in Leicester, and 4 years later, she began studying pharmacy at the University of Manchester. There, she reconnected with Mitesh, an acquaintance who coincidentally attended the same faculty. They initially had no romantic feelings for each other, but over time, it turned into true love. This relationship has helped Mitesh grow and become more confident in himself. He is also accumulating knowledge and becoming more mature. Mitesh was extremely kind and caring towards Jessica, showering her with compliments and gifts. However, their happiness was short-lived. Jessica's mother passed away due to an incurable illness, leaving her devastated. Mitesh stood by Jessica's side, providing emotional support and comfort during this difficult time. As a result, their bond grew stronger. Jessica confided in her sister that she had finally found a trustworthy partner. Mitesh seemed perfect in every way, and she envisioned a happy marriage. In 2008, Mitesh asked Jessica's father for permission to marry her, following traditional Hindu customs. Although her father had reservations about Mitesh and felt that they were too young to get married, Jessica convinced him otherwise. They eventually got married in July 2009. The wedding was held in the beautiful garden of the bride's home. Initially, the newlyweds, Mitesh and Jessica, seemed like a perfect couple. However, things took a turn for the worse soon after. Mitesh's behavior changed dramatically. He became distant and cold, leaving Jessica feeling lonely. Their intimate life also suffered, and they didn't have any physical relationship for about 10 months after their wedding. This was very distressing for Jessica, who couldn't understand why Mitesh's feelings towards her had changed so drastically. Jessica tried to find fault in herself, wondering if she was the reason for Mitesh's change in. Meanwhile, she had just graduated from university in 2010 and was looking forward to starting her career as a pharmacist. She has a good education and a promising career. However, Mitesh's attitude continued to deteriorate. He became increasingly controlling and suspicious, constantly monitoring Jessica's every move. In February, her family suffered another grief. Her grandfather falls ill, his health begins to decline rapidly, and death seems inevitable. Manal's husband does not allow Jessica to spend much time with her family. This was the root of the conflict between they. When Manal confronted her husband about this, he became angry and responded by punching her in the face. As a result, when her grandfather was seriously ill, Jessica was only able to visit him a few times. Jessica comes from a traditional Indian family where his word is the law, restricting her from making her own choices. She felt trapped in a lonely marriage. One day, she confided in her family about her concerns. She expressed her suspicion that her husband, Mitesh, was being unfaithful. She noticed that whenever he received a phone call, he would excuse himself to another room. Additionally, he often stayed up late, spending hours alone, which further fueled her doubts. In 2012, Jessica's suspicions about her husband's infidelity were confirmed when she discovered romantic messages on his phone. Seeking help, she confided in Mitesh's cousin, with whom she had a good relationship. Instead of offering help or advice, the cousin blamed Jessica for her husband's behavior, implying that she was responsible for his infidelity. This response from Mitesh's cousin left Jessica feeling isolated and unsupported. To make matters worse, Mitesh also prohibited her from seeking comfort from her own sisters. It became clear that Mitesh was hiding something and trying to maintain his reputation and authority within the family and local community. In 2014, Mitesh and Jessica relocated to Liner, a suburb of Middlesbrough in North Yorkshire, in an effort to start anew and distance themselves from their family. They purchased a large house, made renovations, and later opened their own pharmacy. Jessica had hoped that this fresh start would bring positive changes to their relationship. While their relationship did improve slightly, one thing was still missing: children. For 6 years, Jessica struggled with infertility, and Mitesh made veiled threats that he would leave her if she didn't become pregnant. In October 2015, she decided to go through in vitro fertilization. However, the initial attempts were unsuccessful, causing her to become increasingly anxious and depressed, especially with the added stress of hormone treatments. To make matters worse, Mitesh's behavior changed. He became distant and cold towards her at home. He would only show affection in public, and even then, it seemed superficial. He was often preoccupied with his phone, and the tension between them became unbearable. She reached her breaking point and suggested they separate, confessing that she was unhappy in the marriage. Mitesh's response caught her off guard. He claimed to love her and promised that things would improve over time. He even suggested that having a baby would strengthen their family bond. Jessica believed his words. For a moment she felt comforted and listened to, and her doubts subsided. On May 9, 2018, Mitesh and Jessica Patel received the exciting news that 3 of their embryos had been successfully fertilized, with a transfer scheduled for the following month. Jessica was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a mother and eagerly shared the news with her family. Tragically, their happiness was short-lived. A few days later, on the evening of May 14, 2018, Mitesh Patel made a frantic call to the emergency services, reporting that he had found his wife's body at their home. He claimed that he had left the house earlier to buy food and pick up his laptop from work. When he returned home, he found that the house had been burglarized and Jessica was lying unconscious on the living room floor. Mitesh told police that Jessica's skin was cold to the touch and there were bruises on her neck. He was clearly distressed, crying as he spoke. The police assured him that rescuers were on the way. When the officers arrived, they found Jessica's body on the living room floor, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape. A grocery bag was nearby. Despite the medical team's efforts, Jessica died on the scene. The investigators sought to determine the motive behind the heinous crime. Upon examination, they found that the house had been thoroughly ransacked, with drawers and closets turned upside down. It was evident that the perpetrators had been searching for valuables, as they had even torn apart their bed mattress. The missing jewelry and cash further supported the notion that the primary motive was robbery. Jessica's husband, Mitesh, also believed that their house had been targeted by robbers. According to Mitesh's statement, on the day of the incident, he followed his usual routine, working a morning shift, going to the gym, and returning home afterward. His wife came home around 7 p.m. Later, Mitesh decided to order pizza and left the house at 7:44 p.m. Surveillance footage from a nearby pizzeria corroborated his alibi. Before leaving the pizzeria, he tried to call his wife to tell her he was on his way home, but no one picked up. Mitesh stopped at a pharmacy without notice, so he returned home later than expected. When Mitesh returned home at 8:50 p.m., he was met with a gruesome scene. His wife was bound, and their belongings were scattered everywhere. Neighbors was left reeling after the tragic event. This neighborhood is known as a wealthy and peaceful place, and has never had a crime before. The autopsy report revealed that Jessica's cause of death was strangulation, with the attacker using a bag, bare hands, and an electrical cord to ensure her demise. Since there were no signs of forced entry, investigators initially suspected that Jessica knew her attacker and had let them into the house. Jessica's family quickly arrived and comforted Mitesh, who appeared to be extremely sad and lost over the passing of his wife. However, the police had their suspicions, and a thorough search of the house uncovered some crucial clues that would eventually lead to the capture and trial of the perpetrator. A health monitoring app on Jessica's phone also played an important role in finding the truth. 3 days after Jessica's murder, the lead investigator contacted her father, who was still near the crime scene, and asked him and other relatives to return home so as not to interfere with the ongoing investigation. The investigator promised to provide more information later. Meanwhile, detectives were preparing to arrest the prime suspect in the case, Mitesh Patel. Several key pieces of evidence had led them to this conclusion. During the search of the crime scene, police found a damaged hard drive from a surveillance camera installed in front of the front door. The device was discovered in a suitcase under the bed. Further investigation uncovered a hidden photograph in their nightstand that showed Mitesh embracing another man named Amit. Additionally, footage from a camera across the street revealed that only Mitesh and Jessica entered and exited their home on the day of the murder, May 14th. The footage shows that Mitesh returned home at 3:30 p.m. Jessica arrived home from work at 7 p.m. and Mitesh left the house briefly to pick up pizza at 7:44 p.m., returning at 8:50 p.m. Since no one else was seen entering or leaving the house, the evidence pointed to one conclusion: Mitesh was the likely perpetrator. Mitesh was the prime suspect in the investigation, but the police lacked concrete evidence against him. As the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a shocking secret that Mitesh had carefully kept hidden. Jessica had suspected that her husband was being unfaithful, and her instincts were correct. However, it was not what she expected. Mitesh was hiding his true sexual orientation. His marriage to Jessica was just a cover, a way to hide his true feelings for other men. 2 years into their marriage, Mitesh met Amit, an Indian man who was openly gay. Despite their cultural differences, they men quickly fell in love and secretly met each other whenever Mitesh was away on business. Unbeknownst to Jessica, her husband was leading a double life, pretending to be the perfect spouse while carrying on an illicit affair. In 2016, Amit moved to Australia, but Amit and Mitesh continued their relationship. Mitesh had had a plan to become same-sex parents with Amit by using Jessica's embryos and finding a surrogate. Mitesh had informed Amit that Jessica was having in vitro fertilization, IVF, and had asked if they could be together after this plan, to which Amit had replied that it would depend on the results. Mitesh confided in Amit, stating that eventually there would be no more obstacles in their relationship. In a message, Mitesh chillingly wrote, "Jessica's days are numbered." It was later discovered that Mitesh was secretly taking fertility-affecting medication to avoid intimate relations with Jessica. The investigation revealed that Mitesh's internet search history was reconstructed. He had searched for how to get rid of his wife, Hindu funeral, and procedure for obtaining insurance payments for the murder of a spouse. Notably, Jessica had a £2 million life insurance policy. After her death, Mitesh planned to claim the money and use it to buy a property in Australia. In the weeks leading up to Jessica's death, Mitesh had been actively searching for a new home, aiming to create a comfortable environment for his future family. Investigators analyzed their cell phones and found incriminating messages. They also discovered a fitness app that tracked the number of steps taken by Jessica's. The data showed that Jessica's phone had not moved since 8:04 p.m. However, 15 minutes later, the phone recorded 14 steps, suggesting that either Jessica had made her last movements or someone had moved the device. In contrast, Mitesh's phone data revealed high physical activity and an elevated heart rate in the period leading up to his wife's murder, which was unusual for him. Between 7:44 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., Jessica's husband, Mitesh, walked up and down the stairs multiple times, creating false evidence of a burglary by throwing objects around the house. Before calling 911, he went upstairs to conceal evidence, including a hard drive from a surveillance camera in the safe of the pharmacy he and his wife owned. During the police investigation, they found stolen jewelry, £25,000, and a couple of gold bars, which Mitesh claimed had been taken during the robbery. They also discovered a roll of duct tape similar to the one used to bind the victim's arms and legs. The torn end of the tape matched the piece taken as evidence from Jessica's body. To create an alibi, Mitesh had to go to his workplace the evening after the pizza party. Despite planning for years, he was remarkably careless and left a trail of evidence behind. Furthermore, DNA analysis found under Jessica's fingernails showed that it matched Mitesh's DNA. Mitesh had scratch marks on his neck, which he attributed to a fall. During the investigation and subsequent trial, Mitesh, the accused, denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that his interactions with Jessica were mere coincidence. The 3-week trial strung together the developments in the case. It was established that he attacked his wife as soon as she entered the house. She fought back and scratched the attacker but was eventually controlled. Initially, Mitesh had planned to kill his wife by administering the lethal dose of insulin. However, this method takes a long time to be effective and there is a risk that the plan will be discovered. To ensure a quicker outcome, Mitesh suffocated his wife by putting a bag over her head. To make sure his wife was dead, he strangled her with his hands and then used a rope. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including empty ampules found in Mitesh Patel's laptop bag, which linked him to the crime. Mitesh brutally murdered his wife, Jessica, in their home, a place they had shared for years. The entire ordeal took only 20 minutes. He then brutally tied her up to create the appearance that she had been robbed. Following the murder, Mitesh went about his day as usual, even stopping at a pizza place and calling Jessica's phone. The news of her death left both families in shock and disbelief. Tragically, Jessica had been seeking help in the months leading up to her murder, but her cries for aid were ignored. Only her sister seemed worried, but they couldn't do much to help either. The jury deliberated for 2 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. On December 5, 2018, the court sentenced Mitesh Patel to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Mitesh showed no remorse for his actions, and it seemed that the only person he felt sorry for was himself. The family was still grappling with the loss of Jessica's death, remembering her in their daily prayers and cherishing the happy moments they had shared together. It is unlikely that they will ever forgive Mitesh for his heinous crime. According to Hindu beliefs, her soul must be reborn. Since she suffered a lot in life and was unhappy but remained a good person, in the next incarnation, she will be rewarded. At least that was a comfort to her loved ones. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Celeste Mano. Celeste Mano was born on November 30, 1997, in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. She was the youngest of 2 children to parents Eggy Diro and Tony Mano, and grew up with her older brother Alessandro. Although her parents separated when she was young, her father remained involved in her life, providing financial support and maintaining a relationship with his children. Celeste was a sociable and active student who enjoyed sports, dance. Initially, she wanted to become a lawyer and enrolled at the University of Melbourne to study criminal and civil law. However, she later lost interest in law and switched to studying advertising and marketing. In 2018, she landed a job at a rapidly growing e-commerce company. She rapidly advanced in her career, rising from a call center worker to the head of a department in just a few years. She was considered one of the company's most promising employees. Celeste has always been the center of attention, especially among men. However, she is very picky about her partners. Meanwhile, one of her colleagues, Louis Seiko, has had his eye on her since she started working at the company. He is almost 16 years older than her and has shown no signs of career ambition, remaining in the same subordinate position for many years. Despite his reserved nature, Louis Seiko was friendly and polite. He often asked Celeste out, but she consistently declined. Instead of taking the hint, Louis Seiko chose to view her rejections as a challenge or a game. He believed that Celeste was playing hard to get and was determined to win her over. Despite her clear lack of interest, Louis Seiko continued to try and draw her attention through various means. Celeste finds Louis Seiko's attention annoying, but she tries to keep her cool, hoping that he will eventually lose interest or focus on someone else. However, Louis Seiko's infatuation with Celeste grows stronger over time, becoming an obsession that everyone around him notices. Celeste confided in a close friend and colleague that she would never consider a romantic relationship with Louis Seiko due to several reasons. Firstly, she found him odd and unpredictable. Secondly, she was not attracted to men lacking ambition and life goals. Lastly, their significant age difference was also a factor. Despite feeling pity for Louis Seiko, she knew he had no chance with her. Louis Seiko's relentless pursuit of Celeste led to a critical mistake: he neglected his work duties. As a result, his productivity plummeted, which did not go unnoticed by senior management. Louis Seiko received 3 reprimands and warnings before being dismissed in early autumn 2019. As he gathered his belongings in the office, he appeared on the verge of tears, clearly devastated by the outcome. Celeste is relieved when Louis Seiko finally leaves her alone, but she also feels guilty, thinking that her actions contributed to his firing. Manel, as a department manager, thanked Louis Seiko for his years of service and escorted Louis Seiko out of the building. As they parted, he patted Louis Seiko on the back and sincerely wished him luck. The dismissed employee, Louis Seiko, came to a surprising realization. He thought Celeste was hesitant to pursue an office romance because she was his superior, and it might harm her career. Now, Louis Seiko believed that there were no obstacles to their happiness, and they could be together. Overcome with emotion, Louis Seiko suddenly kissed Celeste on the cheek. Shocked by his bold move, Celeste was speechless. She quickly turned around and fled back into the office without saying a word. Louis Seiko misinterpreted her reaction, thinking that Celeste had feelings for him and that he shouldn't give up on pursuing her. After being fired, Louis Seiko created a social media account and sent Celeste a friend request, which she initially accepted. However, when he began asking her to meet up and go out, she politely declined and eventually blocked him. Undeterred, Louis Seiko created a new profile and sent her another friend request the next day. Celeste tried to ignore him, but he continued to comment on her photos, complimenting her appearance and suggesting they would make a great couple. To limit Louis Seiko contact, Celeste adjusted her profile settings to restrict messages, comments, and posts to only her friends. Despite this, a week later, she started receiving romantic messages from an unknown number, which she suspected were from Louis Seiko. The messages included poems he had written, admiring her beauty and trying to persuade her to go out with him. This was particularly concerning since Louis Seiko had never had her personal phone number during their time working together, and she had only communicated with him through work channels. Celeste initially tried to address the stalker by answering one of his calls. Celeste explained to him that there was no possibility of a relationship and urged him to stop contacting her. Unfortunately, Louis Seiko was not receptive to her message and instead continued to focus on how much he enjoyed hearing her voice. Despite Celeste's attempts to block him, Louis Seiko managed to circumvent this by calling from different numbers each time. Feeling harassed, Celeste eventually changed her phone number, but to her surprise, Louis Seiko was able to obtain her new number within a week. Celeste had been trying to protect herself from Louis Seiko, a crazed fan, for about 6 months. Despite blocking Louis Seiko's phone number and fake social media accounts, and ignoring his messages, the harassment continued. The messages escalated from romantic to bold and threatening, followed by demands to meet Celeste. Celeste had no idea that Louis Seiko had begun following her from work to her home, knowing her address. At first, she caught glimpses of Louis Seiko near her home, but Celeste assumed it was because she was too nervous. However, when she realized that Louis Seiko was actually following her, she knew she needed help. Celeste decided to seek police protection, hoping to obtain a restraining order that would prohibit the stalker from approaching her or her home. The police officers were unresponsive to Celeste's concerns, seeming to mock her request for help. They claimed that Louis Seiko had not done anything illegal, as writing explicit poems or fantasies in text messages is not against the law. Without evidence of Louis Seiko following or lurking near her home, Celeste was told to leave the police station. Celeste continued to be harassed by Louis Seiko on a regular basis. During the day, she would see his car parked across the street from her office, and at night, he would drive past her house several times. This constant presence made her feel uneasy. In August 2020, Celeste returned to the police station, this time providing photo and video evidence on her phone that showed Louis Seiko was indeed stalking her. A different officer took her statement and was more serious about the situation, expressing surprise at his colleague's previous indifference. He advised Celeste to go to court immediately, where a restraining order was issued against Louis Seiko, prohibiting him from contacting or approaching her in any way. Louis Seiko's sudden disappearance brought Celeste a sense of relief and freedom. However, that feeling did not last long. Less than a month later, she began receiving text messages from unknown numbers. The messages were from Louis Seiko, who initially begged her to retract his statement and drop the restraining order, arguing that it was interfering with their romantic relationship. Over time, his tone shifted from pleading to demanding. Celeste immediately reported the messages to the police, as Louis Seiko's actions were a clear violation of the restraining order. As a result, he was fined and warned that further violations would lead to severe consequences, including the possibility of jail time, if he continued to harass her. After this incident, Louis Seiko remained silent for almost 2 months, leading Celeste to believe that he had finally left her alone. Celeste met Chris Reedsdale in September 2020, and they quickly discovered they shared many common interests. Life views and goals, which led to a romantic relationship. She confides in Chris about her harassment by Louis Seiko, who has been silent for over a month but still worries her. Chris made a conscious effort to make Celeste feel safe and supported, showering her with care and attention. A month later, in early November, Celeste decided it was time to introduce Chris to her family over dinner. Her family welcomed Chris warmly. The next few weeks passed peacefully, and Louis Seiko made no further attempts to contact Celeste. She was happy, spending all her free time with Chris, and it seemed that she had finally forgotten about worrying about Louis Seiko. On November 15, 2020, they went on a date to a cafe, where they sat together, enjoying each other's company. Celeste offered to take a selfie to capture the moment. Celeste loved the photo so much that she decided to use it as her profile picture on social media. By doing so, she also wanted to share the news of her new relationship and make it clear that things were getting serious. Chris also posted the photo on his page, along with a heartfelt caption expressing his love for Celeste. Sadly, this date turned out to be their last. After dropping Celeste off at home, Chris said goodbye, planning to see her again the next day. Celeste spent about an hour in the kitchen with her mother Eggy, before going to bed early to get ready for work the next morning. On November 16, 2020, Eggy was suddenly awakened around 4 a.m. by the sound of breaking glass. At first, she thought the noise was coming from outside, but then she heard more suspicious sounds, including banging, screams, and commotion, which seemed to be coming from within her house. Eggy quickly got out of bed, put on her robe, and rushed to her daughter Celeste's room. As she opened the door, she saw someone jumping away from Celeste's bed and escaping through a broken window. When Eggy turned on the light, she was shocked to see her daughter lying in a pool of blood, covered in cuts and small shards of glass. Celeste was struggling to breathe, her eyes wide open and looking up. Eggy immediately called an ambulance and tried to stem the bleeding from her daughter's deep wounds while she waited for help to arrive. Tragically, despite their best efforts, Celeste passed away before police and paramedics arrived. The medical examiners found over 20 stab wounds on the victim's body, with the fatal blow being a wound to her heart. After investigating the scene and comparing it to Eggy's testimony, the police concluded that the attacker broke into the Celeste's room through the window and carried out the attack in under 3 minutes, before the Celeste's mother entered the room. The attacker used a large butcher's knife, striking randomly, and the Celeste tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the numerous cuts on her arms. When asked if the Celeste had any enemies, Eggy mentioned Louis Seiko, who had been harassing the victim with calls and threatening messages for over a year. This information was confirmed by other family members, friends, and colleagues. The suspect left behind a large number of bloody fingerprints at the scene, as well as DNA on a fence he jumped over while fleeing, which was likely due to an injury to his hand. As a result, it was crucial to detain and interrogate Louis Seiko immediately, as he was the prime suspect in the case, and to verify and compare all the evidence and witness statements. Louis Seiko was immediately taken into custody but initially claimed to be innocent, professing his love for Celeste and insisting he could never hurt her. However, forensic analysis quickly proved him wrong. His bloody fingerprints were found both in Celeste's room and on the fence surrounding her property, tying him to the crime scene. Investigation revealed a prior restraining order, which prohibited Louis Seiko from approaching Celeste. Notably, the night before the crime, he bought a hammer and large knife at a local hardware store. The store's security cameras caught him purchasing the tools at checkout. It later emerged that he used these tools to carry out the violent crime, smashing through a window to enter Celeste's house and fatally stabbing her with the knife. The case against Louis Seiko was overwhelming, with evidence showing he had been watching his victim for a long time and knew everything about her. The final straw was when she posted a photo of her new boyfriend on social media. After that, Louis Seiko bought a knife and hammer and snuck into the victim's home at night to harm her. His actions seemed deliberate and planned. Louis Seiko's personal life was marked by instability. At 39, he had never married, still lived with his parents, had few friends, and had trouble holding down a job. He also had a family history of mental health issues, with a brother serving a long prison sentence for a serious crime. Louis Seiko's lawyer arguing that he needed specialized treatment rather than imprisonment. However, this claim outraged the victim's family, who feared that Louis Seiko would escape punishment. The psychiatric experts ultimately concluded that while Louis Seiko did have mental health issues, he was fully aware of his actions when he committed the crime. He had planned the details in advance, which meant he would have to stand trial. The murder trial is set for the fall of 2023, 3 years after Celeste's tragic death. In the years leading up to the trial, Louis Seiko attempted to argue that he was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. He spent much of that time in a psychiatric ward. During the trial, Louis Seiko remained calm and detached, seemingly uninterested in the proceedings. He admitted to his guilt but claimed that his intention was not to take Celeste's life, but rather to win her love. However, the jury unanimously found him guilty on all counts. As a result, he was sentenced to 36 years in prison, with the possibility of parole only after serving 30 years. The Celeste's parents drew attention to the fact that their daughter had reported the perpetrator to the police as early as 2020, seeking protection from him. However, her complaint was not accepted due to a loophole in the existing legislation. This led to calls for a change in the law, which would later be referred to as Celeste's Law. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carol Maltesi. Carol Nicole Maltesi was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy, to parents Fabio and Josephine. Her mother was of Italian descent, while her father had Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents divorced, and she remained with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, where he remarried and had more children. Despite her father's lack of support, Josephine chose to stay in Italy and raise Carol on her own. Carol and her mother lived in a small community called Sesto Kenda. Her mother worked multiple jobs to provide Carol with a good education and opportunities for a better life. As a result, Carol grew into a beautiful, kind, and sociable young woman with many friends and an easy rapport with others. She was an active schoolgirl who participated in sports, such as horseback riding, and regularly attended a dance studio. Carol was fluent in 3 languages, loved traveling across Europe, and was an avid reader who could engage in conversations on a wide range of topics. As Carol entered her teenage years, she had many admirers and enjoyed being the center of attention. After completing her secondary education, Carol enrolled in a technical university to study industrial design, arts, and fashion. During her freshman year, Carol discovered she was pregnant after developing a romantic relationship with a young man studying architecture and design. The pregnancy was unexpected, and both Carol and her father were unprepared. Despite the challenges, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol, then 20 years old, gave birth to a son. The arrival of the baby significantly impacted her life. Due to financial constraints, she had to leave school to support themselves and their child. She relocated to Verona in search of better opportunities to provide for their family. Carol found employment as a sales consultant in a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son was 1 year old. Meanwhile, her boyfriend worked on projects from home and took care of their son. However, in mid-2019, Carol's life took another turn when she fell in love with Angelo. They began a passionate affair, secretly meeting in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. The affair lasted for about 6 months, during which they tried to spend as much time together as possible. But just before the new year, Carol's boyfriend discovered her infidelity and decided to end their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best that she was leaving, as she had already planned to move in with her new boyfriend. However, they faced a challenge. Angelo lived with his parents, and Carol couldn't join him with her child from a previous relationship. They decided to rent a place together, but their plans were disrupted, which left them jobless and unable to afford a home. Carol had to move into Angelo's parents' house and temporarily leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father. Carol struggled financially, but Angelo and his parents supported her as much as possible. She had to rely on them completely, unable to contribute to her son's care. To make matters worse, her mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive treatment. In desperation, Carol looked for ways to earn money from home to support her son and ailing mother. She turned to social media and created a YouTube channel, sharing her experiences of life in isolation. Although her content didn't attract much attention, her striking appearance drew comments, including some unwanted and inappropriate proposals. A subscriber suggested that Carol create an account on the adult content platform OnlyFans, citing her attractive appearance and potential for quick success. Taking this advice, Carol registered under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting intimate photos and videos. She quickly gained a large following and started earning a substantial income. As time went on, Carol's content became more explicit and bold and was appreciated by her fans. However, she keeps her work a secret from her boyfriend and relatives. This secrecy was short-lived because an acquaintance of hers discovered her account about 6 months later. Although Carol tried to justify her work as an art form that gave her financial security and personal fulfillment, her acquaintances did not accept it. Friends and acquaintances gradually distanced themselves from her, believing that her work was immoral and fearing that association with her would damage their reputations. Carol saw this reaction as prejudice and remained confident that she would achieve success and wealth as an adult film star. Carol's newfound popularity attracted the attention of adult film studios, and several directors approached her with offers to star in their productions. She soon accepted the invitation and participated in group photo sessions. Unbeknownst to her, her activities went unnoticed, and her boyfriend, Angelo, was shocked to discover that she was not working remotely as a designer as she had claimed she would. He felt lost and didn't know how to react because he had no plans to end their relationship. However, when Angelo's parents learned of Carol's profession, they urged him to end the relationship immediately, fearing she would bring shame to their family. At that time, Carol achieved financial stability thanks to her popular OnlyFans account and increasing salaries from film directors. In interviews, she expressed her intention to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. However, she increasingly loved her current job and was completely immersed in it. Despite her success, Carol faced constant moral pressure from those around her, who judged and tried to shame her. This led to certain psychological trauma. She defended her profession, calling it art, and supported women's right to choose a career without fear of judgment or social consequences. At the age of 25, Carol moved to Rescaldina, a small town in the province of Milan, with the intention of starting again. She planned to abandon her career in the adult entertainment industry and secure a job as a sales consultant at a perfume shop. However, this job of hers only lasted for a short time. A few months later, Carol met David Fontana, a 42-year-old local banker with a passion for photography, especially nude photography. They connected online, where David was searching for photo models for his projects. Carol reciprocated his offer, and upon their first meeting, they felt an intense mutual attraction. Despite being married, David pursued a relationship with Carol and they began dating. Their relationship involved photo sessions that often led to intimate encounters. David soon discovered Carol's past experience in the adult industry and encouraged her to resume her career, citing her talent. However, David's feelings for Carol were complex. He loved her, desired to possess her, and also enjoyed watching her in adult films. In March 2021, David divorced his wife and moved in with Carol, allowing them to explore their most explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating content for OnlyFans, a platform where she gained immense popularity. However, David took a share of the profits from their joint work. As Carol's success grew, she began receiving lucrative offers from foreign directors and studios for film shoots. David was a jealous boyfriend who would become annoyed when others showed interest in Carol in public or tried to flirt with her. However, he never interfered with her work as an adult film actress, treating it as a normal job that she felt comfortable with. On the other hand, after Angelo and Carol broke up, Angelo confessed that he had missed her and asked to get back together, saying that he would accept her profession and not restrict her freedom. Carol appreciated Angelo's efforts but revealed that she had already met someone else. Even so, Angelo and Carol continued to communicate. However, when David found out, he became angry, threatened Angelo, and burned his car and finally broke up with Carol. Angelo reported the incident to the police, who issued a restraining order against David, but ultimately found no evidence linking him to arson. As Carol's career took off, Carol frequently traveled for filming and attracted a large following. She was trying to buy a house for herself and her son and planned to leave the adult film industry to focus on raising her son. To achieve this goal, she started creating custom videos for fans, who would send her scripts and pay her to make their fantasies come true. This idea brought high profits to Carol. Carol and David continued to work together in film despite their personal separation. During a September 2021 film shoot, Carol met co-star Salvatore Galdo, and a romance blossomed. She and Salvatore eventually formalized their relationship, deciding to get married after taking the time to ensure they were both ready to move forward. As they planned their future together, they made a conscious effort to maintain their independence and keep their relationship private. They had learned from past experiences and wanted to approach their new relationship with a clear understanding of each other's needs and boundaries. In the end, Carol and Salvatore were able to build a strong foundation for their relationship, free from the entanglements of their past. They were able to move forward together, focusing on their shared future and leaving their complicated pasts behind. Carol's social media activity had slowed down significantly. Although new posts occasionally appeared on her account, she rarely interacted with anyone, keeping her responses brief. Her latest photos suggested she had recently gone on a seaside vacation, but she hadn't shared her plans with anyone. Everything was happening peacefully. But on March 20, 2022, in a deserted area near Italian Borno, a passerby had made a disturbing discovery. He had been walking along a cliff when he had spotted large black bags of trash on a slope near a body of water. He had felt uncomfortable seeing garbage in such a beautiful location, so he had decided to throw it away. When he had approached one of the bags, he had noticed that it was unusually heavy. His curiosity had turned to horror when he had seen human fingers poking out through the tear in the polyethylene plastic. The man who quickly contacted the police, and when officers arrived, they found 4 bags with a human body that had been divided into 18 parts. Due to the extreme disfigurement, identifying the remains seemed unlikely. Forensic analysis showed that the victim was a young woman who had been deceased for at least 2 months, but the cause of death could not be determined. It was clear that the body had been stored in a freezer before being thrown off a cliff in a remote area, likely with the intention of remaining hidden for a long time. Upon impact, the bags tore, spilling some of the contents. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the victim's identity by removing any distinctive features, such as tattoos, although damaged remnants of these tattoos still existed. The skin in those areas had been severely damaged with burns from hot objects, cuts, and acid. Despite this, police were able to piece together fragments of the tattoos and compare them with a missing persons database. A breakthrough came when a news report about the body was broadcast, asking anyone who might recognize the described features to come forward. Shortly after, a woman who worked in adult films visited the police station and identified the tattoos as belonging to a colleague who had disappeared in early January. The actress knew the deceased as Charlotte, but did not know her real name. This new information was crucial, as it allowed police to establish the victim's identity and real name. Once her identity was known, it was revealed that she had become engaged to Salvatore Galdo, a colleague, shortly before her disappearance. However, Galdo had not reported his fiancée missing, which raised suspicions. He was detained as the first suspect, but he appeared genuinely distraught over his fiancée's death and puzzled as to why he was under suspicion. According to Salvatore, he had been in regular contact with his fiancée through messaging apps and social media, and he had proof of their correspondence. He claimed that Carol had caught sick and was self-isolating, which is why he hadn't visited her. When asked why he hadn't called to check on her, he said he had spoken with David Fontana, who lived nearby and had promised to care for her. Although Salvatore's story was unclear and unconvincing, his testimony led police to a second suspect who needed to be questioned. However, before police could search for David, he appeared at the station to report a missing person. This was a surprising turn of events. David had not been following the news and did not expect the body to be found so quickly. When he learned that Carol's body had been discovered and identified, he became worried. But when Salvatore was arrested, David realized the police would likely find him, as he had communicated with Salvatore by phone and fabricated a story about taking care of Carol while she had sick. When questioned, David appeared nervous and gave conflicting accounts of his relationship with Carol. He claimed he and Carol were close, but they had not seen each other in months and she had suddenly stopped contacting him. After hours of questioning, David finally cracked under the pressure and began confessing that he had accidentally killed Carol, claiming it had happened in early January during a filming session for a client who had paid a large amount of money. The script had called for him to tie and gag Carol, put a bag over her head, and brutally beat and torture her with tools, including a hammer. David and Carol had agreed that David wouldn't hit her too hard, but she would act like she was in a lot of pain. However, David claimed he had accidentally delivered a hammer blow and fractured her skull. When he removed the bag, he saw that she was about to die, but instead of seeking medical help, he had decided to end her suffering with one last blow of the hammer. But surprisingly, the investigation revealed that the mysterious customer was actually David, who contacted Carol using a fake account. He had come up with a revenge plan because Carol had wanted to leave him. At about 9 p.m. on January 11th, David had used a hammer to kill Carol. The next day, he had bought a large freezer using Carol's credit card, as well as a saw and axe from a hardware store, which he had used to dismember her body. David had attempted to disfigure her body to prevent identification by removing her tattoos and skin and attempting to burn and shred the rest. After murdering Carol, David stored her body parts in bags and kept them in a freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he deceived her relatives and friends by communicating with them through her phone and social media accounts, creating the illusion that she was still alive. By the end of March, David thought it was safe to dispose of the body and dumped it off a cliff in a remote area. He hoped that the remains would either never be found or would have decomposed beyond recognition by the time they were discovered. However, the body was found just 2 days later, and authorities tracked David down within a week. The most puzzling aspect of the case is that none of Carol's relatives or friends reported her missing, despite her disappearance occurring nearly 3 months prior. They were all convinced by the messages and social media posts David had created, and even her fiancé, who thought she was ill, didn't become alarmed when she failed to answer his calls or visit him. If someone had raised the alarm, David would have been tracked immediately through the signal from Carol's phone, which he had kept with him the entire time. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed he loved Carol, stating that her death was unintentional. He also said he had planned to end his own life after her death, unable to cope with the grief. Although this statement seemed implausible, the defense maintained that the incident was an unintentional act of violence. On June 12, 2023, David was found guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation to Carol's son, Carol's mother, and the father of Carol's child, totaling €350,000. Notably, the court did not consider the manner of the killing to be cruel, and the dismemberment of the body was not deemed an aggravating factor. As a result, David may be eligible for parole in the future.